create space on college campuses for conversations about the history, philosophy, and science of religion. And we want students to be able to have a space where they can come and ask hard questions about faith and religion, but also learn how to answer those hard questions. We want them to be able to come and have a place where conversation can lead to foundations in understanding the things that will give them hope and purpose for the rest of their lives. And so that's what we're all about. We exist on college campuses all over the country, and we're just getting started here at U of L. So if you notice on the slides beforehand, and also it'll be out in the hall, there are places where you can scan a QR code for more information about weekly meetings. Tentatively, weekly meetings are going to be started up for the Ratio Christi chapter here on campus every Thursday from 4 to 5:30 in the Student Center. That is tentative. Talk to Dr. Lemaster about that out in the lobby afterwards for more info and specifics on that. But that's the general thing. If you scan that QR code, more info will be there to come on that. But that's enough for me. I'm very, very excited to get to introduce our speaker for tonight. He has his doctorate and a master's degree and every qualification needed to be talking to us about apologetics tonight. And I'll let him do the rest. So please help me welcome Dr. Frank Turek.
Good evening, Cardinals. Let's go back to September 29th, 2006. That's when Petty Officer Michael Monsoor is a United States Navy SEAL operating in Ramadi, Iraq. Monsoor is standing on a roof in Ramadi, and he's standing in front of a doorway to this roof. He has two Navy SEAL teammates lying in the sniper-prone position next to him. They've already taken AK-47 fire and a rocket-propelled grenade, but they're not exactly sure where the enemy is. There's a bit of a lull in the fighting. Insurgents have blocked off the streets in Ramadi, and there's someone on the loudspeaker in the town mosque yelling, "Kill the Americans!" As Monsoor and his team are looking for the next attack, an insurgent from an unknown location throws a grenade up on the roof. It hits Monsoor in the chest, and it falls to his feet. Due to the length of the throw, there's no opportunity to pick it up and throw it back. He has only a split second to make a decision. He can leap through the doorway behind him and save himself, but if he does, his two teammates lying at his feet will surely die. Monsoor yells, "Grenade!" But instead of jumping backward to save himself, he jumps forward, chest first, onto the grenade. It detonates. 30 minutes later, 25-year-old Michael Monsoor is dead. His two teammates lying on the roof receive only minor injuries because Monsoor's body muffled the blast. One of the survivors said at Monsoor's funeral, "Mikey looked death in the face that day and said, 'You will not take my friends, I will go in their stead.'" I've never seen a United States president cry until April of 2008. That's when President George W. Bush invited Monsoor's parents into the East Room of the White House to give them their son's Medal of Honor posthumously. The president couldn't even get through the citation without breaking down. Since then, Monsoor's high school in Garden Grove, California, built a new stadium. They named it Michael A. Monsoor Memorial Stadium. The golden trident insignia that the SEALs wear dominates the 50-yard line. January 2019, North Island, California, just outside of San Diego, the United States Navy commissioned the USS Michael Monsoor, the newest guided missile destroyer in the fleet, 𝗧𝗜𝗠𝗘𝗦𝗧𝗧 class. This is Monsoor's mother, Sally, being escorted onto the ship named in honor of her fallen son. Now, why did they do this? Because Michael Monsoor literally sacrificed himself to save his friends. There's no greater love than to sacrifice yourself to save your friends, said Jesus of Nazareth before he went to the cross. 𝗦𝗘𝗚𝗠𝗘𝗡𝗧𝗦 sacrificed himself to save his friends. The question is, would anyone sacrifice himself to save you? And the answer is, someone already has. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. But many people today don't think the story's true. After all, it was written down by religious people. We know religious people have an agenda. Maybe they embellish this whole thing. After all, it has miracles in it, like resurrections. We've never seen resurrections. How can we believe such a thing? Well, I actually think that it's pretty easy to show that Christianity is true. You only need to answer 4 questions in the affirmative to show that it's true. In other words, if you investigate these 4 questions, I think you'll realize that the answer to these 4 questions is yes. And if the answer to these 4 questions is yes, then Christianity is true. What are the 4 questions? Here are the 4 questions. Now that is some pretty grooving music, isn't it? Yeah. That is actually from our TV show, which is on every Wednesday night on DirecTV channel 378. It's also on Roku, on the NRB channel, National Religious Broadcasters. It's also streamed on our website, so if you want to watch the I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist show, you can. It's on radio. We have a podcast every morning, every Saturday morning. It's on radio, a bunch of stations around the country, but if you're a college student, I know you don't get up until the crack of noon on Saturday, so you're not listening to it then. That's okay. It's podcasted. It's called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. What we do is we present evidence for Christianity, and we cross-examine ideas against it. That's why our website's called crossexamine.org right there. Now, why are these the 4 questions? Truth, God, miracles, and the New Testament. And this is going to serve as our outline here tonight. The first question, does truth exist? Why is that important? Because you hear people saying there's no truth, or you got your truth, I got my truth, or all truth is relative. Well, look, if there's no truth, obviously Christianity can't be true. Of course, if there's no truth, then atheism can't be true either. And by the way, if there was no truth, would you ever come to the University of Louisville? I mean, would you ever go to school? Of course there's truth, right? You're here to learn truth. So we'll deal with that question first. Second question, does God exist? I hope to show you tonight that there really is a theistic God. What's a theistic God? That's a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator who created all things and sustains all things. We're going to look at 3 arguments for this being. These arguments are mentioned in the Bible, but you don't need the Bible to know them. In fact, we're going to attempt to establish point 2, that God does exist without any reference to any religious writing. The third question is, are miracles possible? Obviously, Christianity can't be true if miracles are not possible. But I hope to show you tonight that not only are miracles possible, but the greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred, and even atheists are admitting the data for this miracle. We'll see that tonight. Then we're going to get to the key question, is the New Testament true? The New Testament doesn't have a prayer if there's no truth, no God, or no miracles. But if truth exists, if God exists, if miracles are possible, then we're going to see if there's enough evidence to conclude that one particular event from the ancient world took place, and that event is the resurrection of Jesus. Because if Jesus really rose from the dead, if he really predicted and accomplished his own resurrection from the dead, then game over, Christianity's true. Of course, if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, game over, it's false. This is a worldview you can investigate and determine whether or not, or discover whether or not it's true or false. In fact, even the greatest apostle, Paul himself, said, look, if Jesus hasn't risen from the dead, your faith's in vain. Forget it. It's over. Now, if he rose from the dead, I think that's good evidence he's God. And if he's God, whatever he teaches is true. Jesus taught the Old Testament was the Word of God, and he promised the New Testament. You say, why trust Jesus? Look, I just have a personal policy. If somebody predicts and accomplishes his own resurrection from the dead, I just trust whatever the guy says. All right? Now, we're not going to be able to cover all of this in great detail tonight. So if you want to go further, the books are available online. There's also a 12-part DVD series that goes through all this. This is the book we're talking about tonight. There's another book that is more recent called Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. I've noticed that when atheists are arguing that there is no God, they often have to steal aspects of reality that would only exist if God existed in order to say he doesn't exist. In effect, they have to sit in God's lap to slap his face. But if you want this entire PowerPoint presentation I'm about to show you, just text the word evidence to this phone number, 855-909-0582, and I will send this whole PDF to you, even slides I can't show you because we have limited time. And I'll just send that to you for free if you just text the word evidence to that number, and I'll put that up at the end as well. All right? Now, we're going to go through these questions and then get to Q&A. Actually, I think tonight we won't do Q&A. I think tonight we'll do all Q, no A. All right? So everyone can ask a question. Takes all the pressure off me. All right? No. We'll do Q&A when we get to the end. All right? But we're going to start right here at point 1. Does truth exist? Cardinals, you ready to go? Yeah. All right. Whenever you start talking about truth, you always have to start with Jack Nicholson. Right? Because Tom Cruise had him on the witness stand, and he said to him, "Colonel, I want the truth." And Nicholson said, "You can't handle the truth." Cardinals, that was almost as bad as the Wildcats last night. Ooh, that's an insult, isn't it? He did not say, "You can't handle the truth." If he said it that way, the movie would have gone nowhere. Here's how he said it.
"I want the truth. You can't handle the truth."
All right, let's try it again. "I want the truth."
"You can't handle the truth."
Now that felt better, didn't it? I think you nudged out the Wildcats because they were pretty wimpy last night. Well, there's a lot of people that can't handle the truth. They're saying, "You got your truth, I got my truth, all truth is relative." Well, if you don't get anything else out of what we talk about here tonight, I don't care what you believe. You could be an atheist, Christian, anywhere in between. This next thinking skill we're going to talk about is extremely helpful. In fact, it's the most important thinking skill I've ever learned. I was 33 years old. I already had a master's degree, and I didn't know what I'm about to show you now, to show you what a dimwit I was. And it's so simple, this thinking skill. In fact, if you get this thinking skill down, it's going to save you a lot of pain and suffering. Why? Because it's going to help you discover what is false. And if you can discover what is false, you can avoid trying to live by false principles. If you start living by false principles, ultimately you're going to smack up against reality and it's going to hurt. So this will help you discover what is false, this thinking skill. And the easiest way of showing you this thinking skill is to give you an example of using it. If someone were to come up to you and say, "There is no truth," you should ask that person a question. What should the question be? Yeah, if somebody says there's no truth, you want to say, "Hey, is that true? Is it true that there's no truth?" Because if it's true that there's no truth, the claim there is no truth can't be true, but it claims to be true. Did I say that right? Can everybody see that's a self-defeating statement? What's a self-defeating statement? A self-defeating statement doesn't meet its own standard. A self-defeating statement violates the law of non-contradiction. It would be like me saying I can't speak a word in English. What would you say if I said that? Hey, you just used English to say it. It would be like me saying my parents had no kids that lived. Or my brother is an only child. Or everything I say is a lie. Some of you will get that tomorrow. Or all generalizations are false. Some of you will never get that one. Anyway, these are self-defeating statements, and you got to get good at recognizing self-defeating statements. How do you do it? What you do is you turn the claim on itself. This is the thinking skill. Turn the claim on itself. So if somebody says there is no truth, you turn the claim on itself and you say, "Is that true?" Okay, so let's do a few more of these. Suppose someone says to you, like they don't typically come out and say it this directly, but they may say it this way. They might say, "All truth is relative." If somebody says all truth is relative, if you turn the claim on itself, what are you going to say back to them? Yeah, simply say, "Is that a relative truth?" No, this is an absolute truth claim. It's an absolute truth claim claiming all truth is relative. That's self-defeating. Now, sometimes they don't say it this way. In today's culture, more often it's said like this: "There isn't the truth, only my truth." You know, you've got your truth, I've got my truth. You live your truth, I'll live my truth. There is no the truth. This is so Oprah, right? It sounds so right, doesn't it? You've got your truth, I got my truth. But it's also self-defeating. Why? If someone were to say this to you, what you want to ask them is that just your truth or is it the truth? You see, because this truth up here that you just said, if it's just your own personal truth, then why should I believe it? If it's not objective, if it's just your opinion. But if you're saying this is the truth, you just got done saying there is no such thing as the truth. Now, I know this is unpopular in our culture today, but the truth is there's no such thing as your truth or my truth. There's just the truth. I mean, you might as well just say I have my own math if you're going to say I just have my own truth. Suppose you hire somebody to work for you, and you say, I'll give you $10 an hour, and they work 15 hours for you, and they come up to you and you go, you owe me $15,000. And you go, it's not $15,000, it's $150,000. And the person goes, sorry, I have my own math. You owe me $15,000. You go, you're crazy. No, there's just one truth. It's the truth, and there's just one kind of math. And if you're going to claim otherwise, ultimately, it's going to hurt. Now, sometimes it isn't said this way. Sometimes it's said this way. It's true for you, but not for me. You've probably heard people say that. Well, Christianity's true for you, but Buddhism's true for me. What do you say to that? Turn the claim on itself. This is also self-defeating. It's just a little bit more subtle. If somebody says it's true for you, but not for me, you should say, hey, is that true for everybody? Is true for you, but not for me, true for everybody? Because if true for you, but not for me, is true for everybody, then true for you, but not for me can't be true because it's true for everybody. Did I say that right? I know that can give you intellectual constipation if you think about it long enough. But that's because it's self-defeating. It violates its own standard. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. Actually, there's a more fun way of dealing with this. If someone says it's true for you, but not for me, say, sure, go try that with your bank teller. Yeah, go to your bank teller and say, I'd like $100,000 out of my account. The bank teller looks at your account and says, I'm sorry, you only have $6.12 in your account. It's easy to get the money. You simply say, ha, that's true for you, but not for me. Give me the $100,000. Are you going to get the money? No. If it's true there was only $6.12 in your account, that's true for all people at all times in all places when referring to your account at that time. It's just true. By the way, the same thing is true with whether God exists or not. If he exists, it's true whether you believe it or not. If he doesn't exist, he doesn't exist whether you believe it or not. In fact, I go to a lot of churches. I normally ask people, hey, do you think Christianity's true? Most people will say yes. And then I'll ask them why. Do you know what answer I get more than any other? Because I have faith. Is that a good answer? Does your faith change whether or not God exists or Jesus rose from the dead? No. Your faith doesn't change a thing about those things. You say, well, why is the Bible always talking about faith then? Well, think about this. Think about it. Do you have to believe something to make it true? I mean, do you have to believe in gravity to stay on the ground? Do people who don't believe in gravity float away? Hey, look, there's another one. Hey, if you believe, you'll come back. No, that's not the way it works. You say, why is the Bible always talking about faith then? Because there's two kinds of faith. There's belief that, and then there's belief in. Belief that is getting evidence that God exists, that Jesus rose from the dead, that the documents are historically reliable. But that's all based on evidence. But all the belief that in the world won't get your moral transgressions forgiven. For that, you got to go from belief that to belief in. There's a difference. James, the half-brother of Jesus, who wrote that little book in the New Testament called, you guys are sharp tonight. Wow. He says even the demons believe that God exists, but they tremble. Why? Because they don't trust in him. They don't believe in him. They believe that it's true, but they don't trust him. Do you realize that if God exists, that demons know he exists, but they don't trust in him? They don't want to. That's the difference between belief that and belief in. Belief that is of the head. Belief in is not only of the head, it's of the heart. In fact, we know this in relationships, don't we? When I first met my wife 36 years ago, I got evidence that she would be a good wife. But all the evidence in the world didn't make her my wife. I had to take a step of trust in her to ask her to be my wife. And in a momentary lapse of judgment, she said yes. That's the difference between belief that and belief in. Most of the time when the Bible's talking about faith, it means the second kind, believe in. After you know that it's true, trust in Jesus because he is the Savior. But you have to know that it's true if you're going to be secure to go to belief in. Otherwise, you may be believing a delusion. So there's a difference between belief that and belief in. And God's not going to force you to believe in if you even just believe that. You got to have both. He's going to respect your free will. Now, you've probably heard this too. There's no truth in anything but science. What's the problem with this claim? Sounds so right, doesn't it? But if you turn the claim on itself, what question are you going to ask back? Is that a scientific truth? Can you go in the laboratory and prove this? No, this is a philosophical claim. You can't prove that in the laboratory. In fact, you can't do science without philosophy. Science is built on philosophy. When you get a PhD, what does the PH stand for? Philosophy. Philosophy of physics, philosophy of biology, philosophy of history, whatever it is. In fact, you Christians, you can't understand the Bible without philosophy. You can't understand the newspaper. You don't even know what a newspaper is. You can't understand the internet without philosophy, which is right thinking about reality. In the Stealing from God book, we have a chapter on science. Here's the title of the chapter. Science doesn't say anything. Scientists do. Why do I say that? Science doesn't say anything, scientists do. Because all data needs to be gathered, then all data needs to be interpreted, and who does that? Scientists. And sometimes they get different data or they interpret it differently. This is why, by the way, do you ever wonder why you get conflicting advice on COVID? People say follow the science. Which science? Whose science? Sometimes they have good data, but they interpret it wrongly. Sometimes they have good data, but they interpret it rightly. Sometimes they have bad data, but they interpret it anyway. Sometimes there's a political agenda. No, that they don't have a political agenda. Are you kidding me? Scientists are just as susceptible to the big three temptations that the rest of us are susceptible to: sex, money, and power. And we always have to look at the evidence for ourselves and try and discover how to interpret it rightly. Science doesn't say a word. It's scientists that say things. And if you think about this, ladies and gentlemen, the most important, as wonderful as science is, the most important things in life have nothing to do with science. Honey, do you love me? Yeah. Why? I don't know. Let's run some kind of experiment. No, it's not the way it works. Or how about this? You probably heard this. You should doubt everything. This is a skeptical claim. If you turn the claim on itself, what question might you ask back? Yeah, should I doubt that? Why are skeptics skeptical of everything but skepticism? You notice they don't doubt that. They think it's true. Now, how many people in here, regardless of whether you're a Christian, atheist, anywhere in between, how many people in here sometimes doubt that what you believe is true? Look, if you don't have your hand up right now, you're probably not thinking very much. Look, I've written books on this stuff, and sometimes I wake up in the morning, I go, I don't even know if this is true. Ever do that? But then when I start thinking about my doubts, I realize that my doubts are more emotional than they are intellectual. In other words, the evidence for Christianity is really good. When I'm having a good day, everything's fine. Bad day, don't know. Good day, fine. Bad day, don't know. Good day, fine. Bad day, don't know. What's changing, me or the evidence? Me, I'm going up and down. The evidence stays the same. In fact, sometimes I meet Christians or former Christians who say to me, Frank, you know, I used to be a Christian, but I lost my faith. Do you know what I want to say to them? What I want to say, but I don't because it would be unkind. But sometimes I'm unkind because I'm originally from New Jersey. But when they say I lost my faith, you know what I want to say to them? So, are you telling me that because your psychology changed that God has somehow popped out of existence? Are you telling me because your psychology changed that Jesus didn't rise from the dead? Do you know your psychology is not going to tell you anything about the real world outside your skull? The evidence will. Don't rely on your psychology. Look at the evidence, despite your changing moods. This is why C.S. Lewis correctly said, faith is where you tell your doubts to get off, because faith means trust. Faith means trusting in what you have good evidence to believe is true. Trusting in what you have good evidence to believe it's true. It's not blind. And if you have good evidence to believe it's true, even though you might have emotional doubts, you say, that's wrong. You know, there's a lot of people that can't go on an airplane. Why? They're scared to death. But I submit to you, you know what the evidence shows? It's safer to get to the back of this room in an airplane than to walk there. Okay? because aviation is incredibly safe, but some people psychologically can't fly. They're letting their emotions and their psychology get in the way of the evidence. And that can happen when it comes to God, too. Don't rely on your psychology. Concentrate on the evidence. And if you concentrate on the evidence, I think you'll realize the evidence for Christianity is very good. And then you'll start doubting your doubts. And if you start doubting your doubts, then you're back to knowing something for sure. Have you guys ever thought about doubting your doubts? I doubt it. Oh, this is probably the biggest one in our culture. You ought not judge. Particularly if you're a Christian, people will say, Jesus said don't judge. Why are you judging, you hypocrite? All right, let's leave Jesus aside for just a second. What's the problem with this claim logically? Yeah, if somebody says you ought not judge, you ought to say, isn't that a judgment? Or if they say you ought not judge, you ought to put your hands on your hips and say, then why are you judging me for judging? See, it's a judgment to say that you ought not judge. You say, wait a minute, Frank, didn't Jesus say don't judge? Nope, never said it. Sure he did. He said it in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. All right, I know this is going to sound a little bit weird, but it's true. There are no verses in the Bible. There are no verses in the Bible. Do you think when Matthew was writing his biography of Jesus, which we call a gospel, good news, that when he got to that point, he said, here's chapter 7, verse 1? No. In fact, when were the chapter and verse divisions put in the text? About 500 years ago to help us navigate the text, which is a good thing, right? Because if you didn't have numbers in your Bible, it'd be really hard to find your way around. Imagine one Sunday you go to church, you don't have numbers in your Bible, and the pastor goes, let's go about 2/3 of the way through and see if we can find the same spot, right? You go, no, we can't do that. So the numbers are necessary. The problem is we tend to think if it's got a number in front of it, we can just take it out and make it say whatever we want in isolation. Jesus didn't say don't judge and he just stopped there. What did he say? He said, judge not, lest you be judged. By the same standard you judge others, you be judged by that standard. So before you try and take the speck out of your brother's eye, take the log out of your own eye first, then you'll be better able to help your brother. Is Jesus telling us not to judge here? No, he's telling us to take the speck out of our brother's eye. That involves making a judgment. He's simply saying, get that problem out of your life first so you can better help your brother. So this is not a command not to judge. It's actually a command on how to judge. Don't judge hypocritically. If you've got that problem, fix it, then go help your brother. But it would be completely ridiculous to say don't make judgments. Why? Because number one, it's a judgment itself. And number two, you'd be dead already if you didn't make judgments. You made 100 judgments tonight just getting over here. And now you're wondering, was this a good judgment? This guy's kind of crazy. Forget it. You make judgments every day. Atheists make judgments. Everybody does. Atheists judge there's no God. They judge Jesus didn't rise from the dead, that the New Testament's not telling us the truth, that there's no ultimate purpose to life. When you die, you become worm food. It's over. It's meaningless. Have a nice day. Those are all judgments. The question isn't whether or not you can make judgments. The question is, are your judgments true? I will say this, though. Jesus did save a very stern rebuke for people who were judgmental. And who were the judgmental ones in his day? Pharisees. Who were the Pharisees? They were the religious and political leaders of Israel. They helped run Israel. In fact, Rome delegated much of the day-to-day legal authority to a group called the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling Supreme Court, and the Pharisees were on that court. They were the politicians. And Jesus went after these people. Are you telling me Jesus got involved in politics? Yes. And he wasn't so nice doing it. In fact, if you think Jesus was a sweet guy who's never said a bad word about anyone, you have not read John chapter 2, John chapter 8, or Matthew chapter 23. What happens in John chapter 2? Jesus makes a whip and he goes and he jacks people up in the temple. Sweet and gentle Jesus did this? Yes. And then in John chapter 8, he's having an argument with these Pharisees. He's right in the middle of the argument with them and he says, your father is the devil. Jesus, you can't say that. That's not very Christ-like. Excuse me, I am Christ. Can you imagine you're having an argument with somebody and you stop right in the middle and you go, your father is the devil. Never try that with a sibling, okay? And then in Matthew 23, he's talking to these same Pharisees. What does he say? What are you scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites? You strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Oh, you look great on the outside. You're whitewashed tombs, but on the inside, you're full of dead men's bones. You go a mile to make a convert, and then once you make them a convert, you make them twice as much a son of hell as you are. How will you avoid being condemned to hell? What? Sweet and gentle Jesus said this? Yes, Jesus was not Barney. Can't we all get along, boys and girls? No! I came to bring a sword. It's going to divide mother and daughter, father and son. Jesus was tough. In fact, why was Jesus killed? Number one, he claimed to be God. That was blasphemy to the Jews and sedition to the Romans. He certainly didn't get killed for skipping around saying, love your neighbor, right? That doesn't get you killed. Number two, he spoke truth to power, particularly the temple authorities, Caiaphas and the like. Do you know that Caiaphas knew Jesus had resurrected Lazarus from the dead, and he still wanted Jesus to die anyway? He had evidence Jesus was the Messiah. But what did he say instead? He said, it's better that one innocent man die than the whole nation perish. Caiaphas knew he was the Messiah, and he still wanted him dead. Gotten in the way of business, didn't it? So don't buy into this idea you can't make judgments. Everybody's making judgments, and Jesus was tough. By the way, notice one other thing about judging. Do you ever notice when you compliment somebody, which is a judgment, nobody gets upset? You know, if you say to your best friend, I really love you, you're such a wonderful person, I wish you could be like you. You think your friend's going to say, well, who are you to judge? Right? Your friend's never going to say that. See, I've noticed that people don't have a problem with judging. They just have a problem with judgments they don't like. In fact, if you tell somebody something that's true and they get mad at you, you just helped convict them. As Augustine said, we love the truth when it enlightens us. We hate the truth when it convicts us. A few military people in here. And I was in the Navy for 8 years, which, by the way, stands for never again volunteer yourself. For you military people in here, you always get more flack when you're over the target. If you tell somebody something that's true and they're shooting back at you, you're over the target. They don't want their evil deeds exposed. Jesus said, men love darkness rather than light. So everybody's making judgments. The only question is, are your judgments true? Now, we could spend more time on many more of these. We don't have time. We got to keep moving. I just want to sum up this whole section this way. Can everybody see that this claim right here shoots itself? This is self-defeating. All the other claims we went through are self-defeating too, which means that relativism and postmodernism can't be true because they claim it's true that there is no truth. They're self-defeating. You can't get away from truth. Well, actually, you can get away from it temporarily. How do you do that? You suppress it. Paul talks about this when he writes his letter to the church at Rome. He says, we suppress the truth and unrighteousness to go our own way. We hold the truth down because it's convicting. We want to go here, but it tells us to go there, and we don't want that. It affects all of us. The truth is often inconvenient. In fact, when we get to Q&A later, I may ask you a question if you're not a Christian, and it's not fair for me to do that unless I warn you what the question is ahead of time, so I'm going to tell you what it is right now. This is a question I ask people who are not Christians, and if you're a Christian and you're talking to somebody who isn't, I recommend you try this question. The question is this: if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? I've had atheists stand in front of the microphone in front of hundreds of people and say, no. No? How's that reasonable? How's that rational? It's not. The problem isn't here. The problem's here. They don't want it to be true. They don't want there to be a God. Why? Because they want to be God of their own lives. I'm not saying this is true of all atheists. I'm saying the ones that say no. They're not on a truth quest. They're on a happiness quest. They're just going to believe whatever they think is going to make them happy. Here's the problem. You can make yourself happy over the short term, doing a lot of fun things, but over the long term, it's a disaster. And everyone in this room over 40 knows what I'm talking about because many of us have tried it ourselves, right? You want to get true contentment? You got to go straight through truth, and Jesus is the truth. So always ask the question, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? By the way, it's a good question for an atheist to ask a Christian. If atheism were true, would you become an atheist? Are we just believing stuff because it's attractive to us? because we want it to be true? Or is it really true? So, I think Christianity is true. And if our reasoning is good to this point, relativism and postmodernism are false. Christianity could be true, but so could atheism or some other religious worldview at this point. So what we're going to do now is see if God exists. Does God exist? And we're going to spend most of our time on this question, as a matter of fact. And I said there are three questions, or three arguments, I should say, that we're going to investigate to show that God exists. The first argument is from the beginning of the universe, known as the cosmological argument. Cosmological comes from the Greek word cosmos, which means world or universe. It says if the universe had a beginning, then it must have had a beginner. The second argument is the argument from design, known as the teleological argument. Telos is a Greek word meaning design or purpose. And it says if there's design in the universe and design in you, life, then there must be a designer. Now, these two arguments here have some scientific evidence behind them. We'll see some of that scientific evidence here in just a minute. The third argument doesn't have any science behind it. It's more philosophical in nature, yet it's the argument we've all known since we were very small children. It's the argument from morality known as the moral argument. And it says if there's one thing morally wrong out there, just one, like it's wrong to torture babies for fun, or it's wrong to murder 6 million people in a Holocaust, then there has to be a God. Why? Because if there is no standard beyond us that we're obligated to obey, no standard of goodness, righteousness, or justice, then everything's just a matter of opinion. That's just your opinion against a baby torturer's opinion, or your opinion against, say, Hitler's opinion. We know these matters aren't just a matter of opinion, so there must be an external standard of righteousness and justice that we're obligated to obey, and any deviation from that standard would be what we would call evil. But we're going to get to that later. We've got to start right here at the first argument. Now, you got to admit, it was worth coming here tonight just to see God do that. Wasn't it? Some of you say, I've never seen God move. Oh, really? Check this out. Now, this is the argument that many say points back to the big... Now, I know there are some Christians in here going, Frank, you know, we're Christians in here, and we don't believe in the Big Bang. You guys don't believe in the Big Bang? I believe in the Big Bang. I just know who banged it. In fact, the evidence for the Big Bang is so good that even atheistic scientists are admitting it. Perhaps the most popular scientist of his day, until he died about 5 years ago, was Stephen Hawking, who said this. He said, almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Now, Hawking tried to come up with another explanation other than God as the cause. He failed, but he's admitting the data, that space-time and matter literally had a beginning out of nothing. By the way, Einstein confirmed that with general relativity, that space-time and matter are correlative. They came into existence together. And it wasn't just atheists, but also agnostics, such as Alexander Vilenkin, originally from Russia, but now teaches at Tufts University. In his book, Many Worlds in One, he said this. He said, with the proof now in place, cosmologists, and by the way, a cosmologist is not someone that puts on your makeup. All right, a cosmologist is someone that studies the universe. Cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is now no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Two words in here that I find very interesting. First is the word proof. It's unusual for scientists to use the word proof. Why? Because science, by definition, is tentative. There can be new data that comes down the road later that overturns a previous scientific theory. It happens all the time. But Vilenkin sees so much evidence crossing at one point that he says it constitutes a proof that the universe did have a beginning. Also, the other interesting word is the word problem. Why is it a problem if space, matter, and time had a beginning? Because that would mean that whatever created space, matter, and time must transcend space, matter, and time. In other words, if nature had a beginning, there must be something outside of nature that brought it into existence. Now, we're not going to go through the evidence for this. Why? Number one, we don't have time. Number two, it's all in the book, chapter 3. And number three, it's not controversial. Even atheists are admitting it. They're not arguing over whether or not the universe had a beginning. What they're arguing over is what caused the universe to have a beginning. So let's just jump to the bottom line. Seems to me that if the universe had a beginning, it must have had a beginner. We've got two options. Either no one created something out of nothing, which is the atheistic view, or someone created something out of nothing, which is the theistic view. Now, here's my only question. Which view is more reasonable? That no one created something out of nothing, or that someone created something out of nothing? What do you think? Someone, right? I was at Texas A&M. This had to be 15 years ago. I put this slide up, and one atheist said, oh, I think number one is more reasonable. I said, time out. Let's look at number two first. Number two says someone created something out of nothing. Now, that's a miracle, right? But at least you got a miracle worker. You got someone. Number one is a miracle with no miracle worker. That's clearly absurd. By the way, do you realize that everybody believes in at least one miracle? Christians believe in more than one, but we certainly believe in this one, that the universe was created out of nothing. Atheists believe that no one created the universe out of nothing. At least some of them do, like Lawrence Krauss, who teaches at, or did, at Arizona State University. Seems to me you got to have a lot more faith to believe that no one created the universe out of nothing than someone created the universe out of nothing. Everyone believes in at least one miracle. Anyway, to the folks at Texas A&M that night, I said, to show you how seriously we all take the law of causality. And by the way, the law of causality doesn't say everything has a cause. The law of causality says everything that comes to be has a cause. There has to be an uncaused first cause. It's either the universe or something outside the universe. Anyway, I said to the University of Texas Texas A&M that night, I said, to show you how seriously we all take the law of causality, that things don't pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause. There is nobody sitting here in this auditorium tonight who is currently worried that as you sit here, a hippopotamus has appeared out of nothing, by nothing, in your dorm room and is currently pooping on your pillow. Right? You don't worry about that. You're not worried that a raging Bengal tiger is just going to appear out of nothing, by nothing here in this auditorium and start devouring people. Why? Because you know that things don't pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause. And if the whole universe could do so, why doesn't everything do so? Why don't Teslas pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? You wake up one morning, you look outside, your Hyundai is a Tesla. How do I charge this thing? Right? Why don't MacBook Pros pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? Could have saved me $4,000 if I was just a little bit more patient. If you're hungry after this little seminar here tonight and you want to have a pizza, does it make sense to order one? Or should you just sit in your room, wait, and hope one pops into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? No, it seems to me the atheists have all the faith because they believe that no one created something out of nothing. In fact, here's a good question to ask an atheist. If there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing at all? This is a question Leibniz asked about 200 years ago, a couple hundred years ago. If there is no God, why does anything exist? Now, ladies and gentlemen, most people are in agreement that space, matter, and time had a beginning out of nothing. What could have caused that? Seems to me, if space, matter, and time had a beginning out of nothing, then whatever created space, matter, and time can't be made of space, matter, and time. The cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful to create the universe out of nothing, personal in order to choose to create. You say, why personal? Because to go from a state of nothingness to a state of creation, someone had to make a choice, and only persons make choices. Impersonal forces don't decide to do things. Like gravity doesn't decide, look, if Turek drops that remote one more time, I'm not going to pull it to his hand, right? No. It does the same thing over and over again. Also, the creator would have to have a mind to be able to make a choice. In other words, would have to be intelligent. Now, when you think about a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause, who do you think of? God. You say, well, how do you know it's the Christian God? We don't. Yet. This could be Allah or some other theistic God. We've got to do more research. If we go through the rest of the questions, I think we'll realize that the same being that walked out of the tomb 1,989 years ago is the same being in whose divine nature created the universe out of nothing. But we haven't gotten to that point yet. We just have 6 attributes of the Creator. Could be the Christian God, maybe it isn't. We got to keep moving. So let's go to the second argument, the design argument, the teleological argument. There's 2 aspects to this. The universe appears designed, and you appear to be designed, life. Let's start with the universe. In recent decades, scientists have discovered that the universe is fine-tuned. Many years ago, I debated the brilliant British atheist Christopher Hitchens a couple of times. You can see the debates on our YouTube channel, and he was brilliant, and he sounded more brilliant than he was because he had a British accent. And anyway, Hitchens admitted that this argument is the hardest argument to answer from an atheistic perspective, because if you were to change any one of a number of factors virtually imperceptibly about our universe, there would either be no universe or a universe that couldn't support life. And in fact, even Stephen Hawking admitted this. Here's what Hawking said. He said, if the expansion rate of the universe was different by 1 part in 1,000 million a second after the Big Bang, the universe would have collapsed back on itself or never developed galaxies. If you were to change the expansion rate, that infinitesimal amount, at the very beginning, we wouldn't be here. Now, you can't make any evolutionary kind of explanation for this. Why? Because the expansion rate did not evolve to a particular point. The expansion rate started there. Seems to me the same being that created space, matter, and time is the same being that fine-tuned the expansion rate to be precisely what it needed to be for this universe to exist. Also, the gravitational force, if it were altered by more than 1 part in 10 to the 40th power compared to the strong nuclear force, we wouldn't be here. What's 1 part in 10 to the 40th power? That's 1 part in 1 with 40 zeros following it. You say, Frank, I can't get my head around that number. I know, neither can I. Let me give you an illustration. Take a tape measure and stretch it across the entire known universe. That's a long way. You can't get that tape measure at Lowe's. Set the gravitational force at a particular inch mark on that tape measure. I realize gravity is not measured in inches, but this is just to give you a scale idea in your mind. If the strength of gravity were different by 1 inch in either direction, across a scale as wide as the entire known universe, compared to the strong nuclear force, we wouldn't be here. That's 1 in 10 to the 40 precision. I don't have enough faith to believe that that value just landed there by chance. Oh, and by the way, does chance cause things? Who caused this? Chance. He was just here. No. Chance is not a cause. Chance is a word we use to describe mathematical possibilities. When scientists use the word chance, what do they mean? We don't know. Look, there's only 2 reasons that value is where it is. Either it was designed to be there, or it wasn't. What makes more sense? Seems to me somebody put it there exactly where it needs to be. And this is just one of about a dozen of these factors. Change any one of them, virtually imperceptibly, we don't exist. Also, our solar system appears to be designed with us in mind. Let's take a quick look at the solar system here. Here we are, a third rock from the sun. If we were just a little bit closer to, or a little bit further away, we couldn't survive. A little bit closer to, we'd burn up. A little bit further away, we'd freeze. We are what scientists call the Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It is. That's a lie. It's too cold here in the winter. Axial tilt, 23.5 degrees. Change that slightly, we don't exist. Earth rotation, 24 hours. Change that slightly, we don't exist. The size and distance of the moon from us, change that slightly, we don't exist. If Jupiter was not in its current orbit, we couldn't exist here on Earth. Why not? What does Jupiter do for us? Yeah, its gravitational force is so strong that it attracts most of the meteors and space junk to it rather than us. It's a cosmic vacuum cleaner. In fact, if you take a close-up look at Jupiter, you know what these dark marks are? They're comet fragment strikes that are bigger than the Earth. Thank God for Jupiter. In fact, if Jupiter wasn't there, we wouldn't be here. Same thing is true with Saturn. In fact, let's take a look at the planets here. You got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Earth. Look at poor Pluto down here. You know, Pluto recently has been demoted as a planet. I don't know about you, but I think it's size discrimination. And what if Pluto identifies as a planet? You bigots. Take a look at this. You can hardly see Pluto. Take a look at this. That's Arcturus. That's another star in our galaxy. Here's the sun. Jupiter is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Earth is invisible. Pluto, forget about it. All right, you got Arcturus here? Keep an eye on Arcturus. Where's Arcturus now? Way over here. That's Antares. That's another star in our galaxy. The sun is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Jupiter is invisible. Earth, Pluto, forget about them. In fact, if the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse here would be 5 or 6 Empire State Buildings high. The heavens are awesome. And that's just in our galaxy. And the average distance between stars in our galaxy is 30 trillion miles, and all that distance is necessary for us to exist here on Earth. 30 trillion miles. Now, how far is 30 trillion miles? Far. It'll take you at least 2 tanks of gas on a Toyota Prius to go 30 trillion miles. A number of years ago, my wife and I took our young sons, when they were much younger, to the Desert Museum in Tucson, Arizona. If you ever get to go to Tucson, go on the south side of the city over the hill there. They got this Desert Museum out there, and if you're out there on a clear night, you can see thousands of stars in the sky. So we're out there one night, and the guide says, wow, it's so clear tonight that if we look up at 9:03, we will see the space shuttle in orbit. Oh, come on, we're not going to see the space shuttle. It's only 120 feet long. It's 350 miles up. We're not going to see it. Oh, me of little faith. At 9:03, the guide goes, look! And we look up in the sky, about 70 degrees above the horizon. There's an object streaking out of the western desert sky, relative to us, about like this. I mean, it's really cooking. When it got right about here, it disappeared. I don't know whether Scotty beamed it up or what. Actually, what happened was, despite the fact that we were in total darkness, the space shuttle was so high up that the sun was still reflecting off of it. And then when it got out of the range of the sun, we couldn't see it anymore. Now, when the space shuttle was in orbit, the space shuttle was traveling at about 18,000 miles an hour. That's 5 miles per second. You got trouble getting to school in the morning? Take the space shuttle. 5 miles a second. Think about how fast that is. Well, I did a little calculation to try and figure out how long would it take us if we could get in the space shuttle and go from our star, the sun, to another star in our galaxy, an average distance away, 30 trillion miles. How long do you think it would take to go 30 trillion miles if we could go 5 miles per second? What do you think? Long time. You used to be a math major. It would take us 201,450 years. That means if you got in the space shuttle at the time of Christ and started traveling from our star, the sun, to another star an average distance away inside our galaxy, you've been going 5 miles a second for 2,000 years. You would be less than 1/100th of the way there right now. And we're going to explore space. No, we're not. We're not going anywhere in space. We can hardly get out of our solar system. It took us 9 years to get to Pluto. Well, just how many stars are there in the galaxy? Well, before we look at that, look at what the psalmist said in Psalm 103. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those that fear him. How high are the heavens above the earth? The Hubble Space Telescope helped us discover that. A number of years ago, they trained the Hubble Space Telescope on 1/26 millionth of the sky. They trained it on it for 11 days. This is called Hubble Ultra Deep Field. You can Google this, and you can see this video. It's in the public domain. What's 1/26 millionth of the sky? Go out tonight, put a piece of rice on the end of your finger, hold it up. That piece of rice represents about 1/26 millionth of the sky. So they trained Hubble on that piece of the sky, and what they found is shocking. In fact, I don't know if you can see this on here, but these are mountains right here. See that? This is the southern hemisphere. What I'm going to do when I start this little video, you're going to see the constellations in the southern hemisphere come up, and then Hubble's going to zoom out at this 1/26 millionth of the sky. There is no audio. It's just a composite video. You guys ready? Okay, this is Hubble Ultra Deep Field. Here are the constellations, and let's see what they found. What you're looking at are nearly 10,000 galaxies in 1/26 millionth of the sky. And how many stars are there in the entire universe? The number of stars in the entire universe are about equivalent to the number of grains of sand on all the beaches on all the earth times 100,000. And to go from one star to another star just inside our galaxy going 5 miles a second will take you over 200,000 years. Now you know why the Bible says the heavens declare the glory of God. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to hear anyone ever again at the University of Louisville ever use the word awesome unless you're talking about the heavens or God. Awesome shot, dude. Awesome shirt, dude. Awesome TikTok video. No! What word are you going to say for this? And that verse that I had up there a minute ago, that's not the end of it. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those that fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far as he removed our transgressions from us. The being that created and sustains all those stars is infinite in his power, infinite in his justice, infinite in his love. And that's the only way we can get an idea of what infinity is like, is to look at something which appears infinite to us like the heavens, to get an idea of what the infinite being is like. So when you consider the universe has stars equivalent to sand grains on 100,000 Earths, that might make you feel insignificant, but it shouldn't. Why? Because as amazing as the heavens are, they're not made in the image of God, but you are. So the second part of the teleological argument is that you also appear designed. In fact, this is you in the womb at 11 weeks. Question, is this animal, mineral, vegetable, or human? It's human, right? In fact, let's go back even further than 11 weeks. Let's go back to when your mother and your father got together to conceive you. Have you guys had this talk before? I see some young people in here, so I'll try and be discreet. I also see some older people in here, so I'll try and be discreet as well, just in case you've forgotten how this works. When your mother and your father got together to conceive you, your mother unconsciously perfumed her egg to attract your father, and then your father sent the entire population of the United States, 300 million soldiers, toward your mother's egg. And then there was a race. And you won. Don't let anyone ever tell you you're not special. You beat 300 million others. You have blown away anything Michael Phelps has done. Now, seeing some of you limp in here earlier makes it hard for me to believe you were the fastest soldier in the gene pool, but you were. Now, your soldier was 20 to 30 times smaller than a grain of salt, yet it contained half of the 3.5 billion letter software program, your genome, that makes you you. All the letters were in the right order. And your mother's egg was about the size of a period at the end of a sentence in an average book, and it contained the other half of the 3.5 billion letter software program, your genome, that makes you you. Again, all the letters are in the right order. And when your soldier and your egg came together, a new 100% genetic human being was created. Do you know you have not received any more new genetic information from this point till right now? In fact, there were only 4 things separating you from adulthood: time, air, water, and food. Those are the same 4 things that separate a 2-year-old from adulthood. Does this have implications on the abortion issue? Yeah, I think it does. We don't kill the 2-year-old. Why do we kill the unborn child in the womb? Genetically, it's the same. You say, wait a minute, Frank, you can't legislate morality. All right, no extra charge for this. This is the subject of our first book, creatively titled Legislating Morality. All laws legislate morality. Every law declares one behavior right and the opposite behavior wrong. You can't think of a law that doesn't legislate morality. The only question is, whose morality will we legislate? And when people say, well, don't impose your morals on me, I say, why not? Would that be immoral? And then why are you imposing your morals on me right now? You're saying I ought not impose ought nots, but you're imposing that ought not on me. You're doing the same thing you're claiming I can't do. Actually, the better answer is this. When somebody says, don't impose your morals on me, I think you should say, these aren't my morals. I didn't make this stuff up. I didn't make up the fact that murder's wrong, that abortion's wrong, that rape is wrong, that theft is wrong, that men were made for women and women were made for men, and the best way to perpetuate and stabilize society, which is the reason the government's involved in marriage to begin with, is to legally recognize that man-woman relationship over every other relationship. I didn't make any of this stuff up. This isn't my morality. This isn't your morality. This just happens to be the morality. The one Thomas Jefferson said was self-evident. The one the Apostle Paul said, the Gentiles will not have the law written on their hearts. Now, if you don't like the morality, you don't have a problem with me. I didn't make it up. You have a problem with the Creator upon whose nature this morality is derived. All right, no extra charge for that. Let's go back to this. From this point till right now, a construction project of astonishing complexity began taking place. Cells began multiplying at a rate of 4,000 cells per second. Brain cells began multiplying at a rate of 100,000 cells per second, for most of you anyway. Some cells became brain cells, others heart cells, others lung cells. How did they know how to do this? Nobody knows. Some cells went so far across you to become what they needed to become that it would be equivalent to you today walking across the United States alone. And that construction project continues to this very moment. You just made 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million. Knock it off. Are you thinking about this? Are you going, wait a minute, Frank, time out. I got to concentrate. New red blood cells coming up. No, this is just happening. How is it happening? You know, Aristotle noticed something 2,400 years ago. He didn't know anything about blood cells, but he knew that all of nature was going in a direction. For example, why does an acorn, if it's properly nourished, always go in the direction of becoming an oak tree? Why doesn't it become an elm tree or a birch tree or a seahorse? You say, well, it's programmed to become an oak tree. Well, who programmed it? And is an acorn conscious? Is an acorn in the ground going, all right, what do I have to do to become an oak tree? No, but it reliably goes in the direction of becoming an oak tree. If it doesn't have a mind of its own, and it doesn't, yet it reliably goes in a direction, there must be an external mind directing it toward an end. This is what Aristotle called the unmoved mover. Thomas Aquinas came along in the 1200s AD and he said, this is going to be my 5th way to argue for God. That all of nature's going in a direction, and if it's going in a direction, there must be a director. My words, not his. And if it's going in a direction, someone's directing it. Now, this is not a way back Big Bang cause. This is not a historical cause. What Aristotle was saying and Aquinas was saying is that every single second the universe exists, it needs a cause. In fact, Aristotle mistakenly thought the universe was eternal. But he said, even if it is eternal, you need a cause, a director cause, every single second it exists. So God creates the universe and he creates you. He creates the natural laws that govern the universe and he sustains those natural laws and you every single second the universe exists. This is why the Apostle Paul came along and he said, in him we live and move and have our being, and Christ holds all things together. And the writer of Hebrews says, God sustains all things by his powerful word. In fact, God is to the universe what a band is to music. If a band were up here playing music, the band would be creating and sustaining the music. What would happen to the music the second the band stopped playing? Music's over. Same thing is true with God. He creates the universe. He creates the natural laws that govern it. He creates you, and he sustains all that every single second. Now, there's a lot more in the Stealing from God book about that, but we got to move on to our final God argument, and this is the moral argument. Let me ask you guys a question. How do you know that your quarterback, well, this isn't your quarterback, Joe Burrow is now, right? Okay. Congratulations to the Bengals, by the way. But how do you know your quarterback throwing a touchdown is better than your quarterback throwing a pick six? That's where the other team intercepts it and takes it back to score themselves. How do you know that? What would you have to know in order to know the touchdown was better than the pick six? Not just the rules. You'd have to know the purpose of the game, right? If there's no purpose to the game, you can't say a touchdown was better than a pick six. The reason you can is you know the purpose of the game is to score more points than the other team, and the touchdown gets you closer to that purpose or closer to that goal, where the pick six takes you further away. So unless there's a purpose, you can't say something is good or bad in the game of football. Now, in football, notice that the purpose of the game comes from outside the game. In fact, when the teams are going to show up for the Super Bowl, the rules, the purpose of the game is already established. The commissioner and the owners tweak the rules every year, and everyone knows what the purpose is. They know what the rules are. They don't make it up when they get to the stadium, right? Now, in football, the rules are arbitrary. They could be different, but in life, they're not arbitrary. The purpose comes from God. If there is no God, as even atheists themselves admit, there's no purpose to life. And if there's no purpose to life, you can't say there's a right way to live it or a wrong way to live it. Because you can't say that this action's getting us closer to the purpose where this action's taking us further away. In fact, if there is no God, then the Nazis were not wrong. How did we judge the Nazis at Nuremberg? They said, hey, we were just following orders, killing all these innocent Jews. What did we say in return? You had a moral obligation to disobey an immoral order from your government because there's a standard beyond your government. It's called international law. C.S. Lewis called it the moral law. Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence called it nature's law. What is that? That's God's nature. If that nature doesn't exist, you can't say the Nazis were wrong and the Allies were right. The only way you can is if there's a standard beyond both of those governments. In fact, if there is no God, love is no better than rape. Oh, you may like love better, obviously, but that's just a preference if there's no God. If there's no God, there are no human rights. On this campus and every campus, students have a very big developed sense of rights and justice. And they're right that people do have human rights. But if there's no God, there are no rights. You actually have an argument for God if you're going to say human beings have rights. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men were created equal and endowed by their government? No. Endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. If there's no God, there are no rights. Which means that slavery and racism weren't wrong if there's no God. Murder's not wrong. Rape, theft, none of it's wrong unless there's a standard of right. If there is no God, tolerance is no better than intolerance. Hey, Christians, are Christians commanded to be tolerant? No, tolerance is too weak. Christians are commanded to love. Tolerance says hold your nose and put up with them. Love says reach out and help them. And the way you love people is not to approve of everything they do. The way you love people is to seek what's best for them. So that means sometimes you can't approve of what they do. And every parent and every child knows this. How many parents do we have in here? All right, how many former children do we have in here? Okay, good. Children, if your parent approves of everything you want to do, is that parent loving? No, of course not. You have to stand in the way of evil as a parent. Love does not mean approval. Love means seeking what's best for the other person, and that means sometimes you've got to say, I can't support what you're trying to do. In fact, the great economist Thomas Sowell, who's now 91 years old, put it this way. When you tell people what they need to hear, you're helping them. When you tell people what they want to hear, you're helping yourself. And some of us are too afraid to tell people what they need to hear because we're afraid they're going to be mad at us. Oh, well, you don't really love them then, if you're not willing to take their rage. You can't complain about the problem of evil if there is no God. Why? Doesn't evil disprove God? No. Evil actually shows God does exist. In fact, C.S. Lewis famously thought there wasn't a God because there was too much injustice in the world. Then one day he had an epiphany and he realized his argument didn't work. And he wrote it in the book Mere Christianity. Here's what he wrote. He said, as an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? You see, you wouldn't know what a crooked line was unless you knew what a straight line was, right? You wouldn't know what injustice was unless you knew what justice was. You wouldn't know what immorality was unless you knew what morality was. You wouldn't know that something was not right unless you knew that something was right. You're assuming a standard there. Now, the only way there could be objective morality is if God exists, if there's a standard beyond us. Evil doesn't disprove that. Why? Because evil shows that there must be a standard. You say, how can that be, Frank? Because evil doesn't exist on its own. Evil only exists as a lack in a good thing. Evil is like cancer. If you take all the cancer out of a good body, you got a better body, right? What happens if you take all the body out of the cancer? You got nothing. Evil is like rust in a car. If you take all the rust out of the car, you got a better car. What happens if you take all the car out of the rust? You got a Pinto. Okay, no. It doesn't exist, right? It can't exist on its own. Evil is a lack in a good thing. So if evil exists, we're assuming good exists. But if good exists, by definition, that's what we mean by God. You can put it this way. The shadows prove the sunshine. In order to have shadows, you got to have sunshine. In other words, in order to have evil, you have to have good. Oh, you can have sunshine without shadows. You can have good without evil, but you can't have evil without good because you can't have shadows without sunshine. So if evil exists, and we all know it does, then God exists. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. Now you can ask the question, why does God allow certain evils? That's something we can get to during the Q&A, but you can't say that it disproves God. It may prove there's a devil, but it doesn't disprove God. Last thing on this. What does it mean to submit? Nobody likes this word. We all hate this word. But let's break out the word. Submission. What does mission mean? Well, you've got a goal, right? You've got a purpose. You've got a direction. You're going this way. You're trying to accomplish something. Sub just means you're putting your own desires under this mission. You're submitting yourself to it. Look, if I'm a diva receiver on a football team and I tell the coach, Coach, keep throwing me the ball. You got to keep throwing me the ball. Every time you got to throw me the ball. And coach says, timeout. We can't keep throwing you the ball. We keep throwing you the ball, we're going to lose. We got to spread the ball around. If we spread the ball around, then we're going to win. And if I go, Coach, you know, you're right. I'm going to submit my own personal goals to the goal of the team. Is that a good thing? Yeah, of course it is. Do you realize, ladies and gentlemen, that if God exists, and of course I think he does, we would be absolutely foolish to not submit our own personal little goals to his overall goal. Because your personal little goals are going to die when you do. But if God exists, then they continue into eternity if you're building and pursuing his goals. Submission is a good thing if you're submitted to the right Holy One. We would be foolish if we didn't. Now, what can we show from these three arguments? And I left a lot out. From these three arguments, I think we can conclude we have a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal creator who's intelligent and created all things and sustains all things to this very moment. We haven't even opened the Bible yet, and we appear to have the attributes of the God of the Bible. Again, we don't know if it's Jesus to this point, but it could be at this point. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, well, atheists have good reasons to disagree with this. Actually, if the popular form of atheism that most atheists believe today is true, They don't have any good reasons. In fact, it's impossible for them to have reasons. Why? Because if atheistic materialism is true, the idea that there is no spiritual realm, that you're just a molecular machine, you're driven by the laws of physics, you don't have free will, you're just a moist robot, then we can't reason. In fact, C.S. Lewis said this better than anyone. I can't say it better than him, so let me just show you what C.S. Lewis said about this. He said, suppose there were no intelligence behind the universe. In that case, nobody designed my brain for the purpose of thinking. Thought is merely the byproduct of some atoms within my skull. But if so, how can I trust my own thinking to be true? But if I can't trust my own thinking, of course I can't trust the arguments leading to atheism, and therefore have no reason to be an atheist or anything else. Unless I believe in God, I can't believe in thought, so I can never use thought to disbelieve in God. Boom, as John Madden would say. Can't say it better than that. Atheistic materialism makes reason impossible, which is why Lewis said, and I'm just borrowing from his argument, they're stealing reason from God to argue against him. That's one of the things atheists are stealing from God, the very ability to reason. So, you say, okay, we've got these attributes. How do we know who the true God is? For that, we can look at this question, are miracles possible? And you're probably looking at your watch going, how's he going to finish this, man? We're running out of time. This one goes really quickly because I think it's quite easy to show that miracles are possible. And God can use miracles to tell us who to listen to. If someone can do miracles, maybe that person's speaking for God, in other words. The problem is, a lot of people think miracles are impossible. For example, Noah and the ark. All right, Christians, can we just keep this between ourselves? Can we all agree that Noah and the ark is crazy? It is. All right? It's nuts. And resurrection. How many people in this room have ever seen anyone rise from the dead? Crickets. Yeah, none of us have. Yet, Christianity requires us to believe in something none of us have ever seen. How rational is that? And for some reason, the big problem miracle in the Bible is Jonah. Is that a whale of a tale or a tale of a whale? I mean, what is the deal with Jonah? Can you really believe in Jonah? That seems crazy too. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what is the greatest miracle in the Bible? No, it's not the resurrection. The greatest miracle in the Bible is, I got some of you a second time. Right? The greatest miracle in the Bible is the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If that verse is true, every other verse is at least possible, right? I mean, if God can create the universe out of nothing, can he do whatever he wants? It's not logically impossible inside the universe? Of course he can. And the interesting thing is that the atheists are admitting the data for the first verse. Again, they don't think it's God, but what else could it be? The odds-on favorite is a being like God. So if God can create the universe out of nothing, can he do the Noah miracle? Of course it's crazy, unless God exists. Of course Jonah is silly, unless God exists. In fact, Jesus related Jonah to his own life. He said, just as Jonah was 3 days in the heart of the great fish, so will I be in the heart of the earth. If God can create the universe out of nothing, can he resurrect Jesus from the dead? Of course he can. Now, I just said something you might not agree with. I just said God can do whatever he wants. It's not logically impossible. You're probably thinking, I thought God can do anything. No, there's many things God can't do. He can't do logically impossible things. Like he can't create a square circle. Doesn't exist. Can't create a five-sided triangle. Doesn't exist. Can't create a married bachelor. Doesn't exist. I know some guys try, but no. Can't create a one-ended stick. Doesn't exist. Can't create an honest politician. I mean, come on, there's some things that even God can't do. In fact, you can do some things that God can't do. Like what? You can lie. If God could lie, it wouldn't be the standard of truth. Change. What's he going to change from? He's already a perfect being. Any change would necessitate a move from perfection to imperfection. If he could do those things, he wouldn't be the standard. He wouldn't be God. Now, a couple other quick things about miracles. A lot of people don't believe in miracles because they've never seen one. That's not a good reason to disbelieve something. Why? Because you believe in a lot of things you've never seen. You believe in your mind. Have you ever seen it? You're using it right now. You believe in the laws of logic, the laws of mathematics. Have you ever seen them? Nope, using them right now. You believe in justice. You've never seen justice. Oh, sure I have, Frank. No, you may have seen justice done or not done, but you've never seen justice itself because it's not a physical thing you see. It's an immaterial reality grounded in the nature of God. You've never seen love. Oh, sure, Frank, I love people, they love me. No, you've never seen it, though. It's a virtue. In fact, in our second debate that I had with Christopher Hitchens, some kid from the audience asked Hitchens this question. Christopher, what is love? And Christopher, being a materialist, had to come up with a materialistic answer. So he said, love is a chemical. And I said, don't tell that to your wife. Honey, do you love me? Yeah. Why? I got the chemical today. Tomorrow I might not have it. But right now I got the chemical. No, love is not a chemical. Love is a choice you make to seek what's best for the other person. Now, there may be feelings associated with that, but that's ultimately what it is. You've never seen gravity. Oh, Frank, there it is right there. Nope, you're not seeing gravity. What are you seeing? You're seeing the effects of gravity. And that's how we know God exists. If somebody ever asks you, how do you know God exists? You ought to say, I know God by his effects. This is how scientists think. If they have an effect, they're trying to figure out what caused the effect. So if you see a creation, that's the effect. You ought to reason back to a cause, a creator. If you see design, fine-tuning, that's the effect. You ought to reason back to a cause, a designer. If you see design in life, that's you. You ought to reason back to a cause, a designer. If you sense a moral law written on your heart, that's the effect. You ought to reason back to a moral lawgiver. If you have the ability to think and know things outside your skull, which you do, you ought to reason back to a cause, a mind. You're reasoning from effect to cause. That's what scientists do. In fact, you've never seen George Washington, but you believe he exists. Why? Because he's left effects behind that are better explained by a cause known as George Washington. The same thing is true of Jesus. He's left effects behind that are best explained by a cause known as Jesus of Nazareth, who died and rose again. It's really hard to explain how he is the most influential human being in the history of the world if he didn't rise from the dead. He was just an itinerant preacher in an obscure part of the Roman Empire 2,000 years ago. How does this guy become the center of humanity if he didn't rise from the dead? One last thing about miracles. If miracles occur today, and they don't need to occur today for Christianity to be true, I think they do. In fact, Craig Keener from Asbury Seminary, not far from here, has written a hernia-inducing 2-volume set. It's 1,100 pages on modern-day miracles. He has all sorts of documentation in there. But even if Keener's wrong, miracles, even if they do occur today, probably don't occur all that frequently. Why? If miracles occurred frequently, they wouldn't get our attention as special acts from God. I mean, imagine if resurrections occurred routinely. What would the resurrection of Christ mean? You go to somebody and you go, Jesus rose from the dead to prove he was God. And the guy goes, so what? Uncle Leroy just rose from the dead 2 weeks ago. Now I got to give the inheritance back. No, it's got to be a rare event if it's going to get our attention. They can't be happening all the time. Although there are some spectacular things that happen every day, but we don't call them miracles. Why? Because they happen every day. How many people in here have seen your own flesh and blood born? Mothers? Fathers, right? When you saw your baby born, you didn't go, evolution, right? You went, this is incredible. How does this happen? It happens every day. We don't call it a miracle, but it's amazing. It requires an explanation other than just natural laws, which themselves would require an explanation. All right, let's land the plane at the final question. Is the New Testament true? We know truth exists, God exists, and miracles are possible, but is the New Testament reliable enough? I'm not saying it's inerrant at this point. I'm saying, is it just reliable enough to let us know if one event from the ancient world took place, and that is the resurrection of Jesus? And I'm just going to list 8 reasons why I think the New Testament writers are telling the truth. We don't have time to look at them all. We're just going to look at 2 of them briefly. They all begin with the letter E. They're all alliterated because I used to be a Baptist, all right? E, early sources. The New Testament documents are written very early, and the data in the documents is even earlier than when they wrote it down. There are eyewitness details throughout the text. There's scores of details that only an eyewitness would know in the New Testament documents, particularly the book of Acts and the Gospel of John, that only eyewitnesses would know. Also, there's embarrassing stories. I'll explain that one in a minute, as well as excruciating deaths, because those are the two we're going to look at. Number 5 is embedded confirmation. I don't have time to explain this right now, but if you Google 2 words, you'll get a whole wealth of information on this. And this number 5 here is probably the best evidence you've never heard of that the New Testament writers are independently witnessing the same historical events. They couldn't have made it up. Here are the 2 words to Google: undesigned coincidences. Undesigned coincidences. There are books written on this stuff, and it's amazing when you look at it. Undesigned coincidences. Expected predictions, that deals with Old Testament prophecy. If I only had one Old Testament prophecy to make my case on, it would be Isaiah chapter 53, written 700 years prior to Christ. Also, extra biblical writers. These are ancient non-Christian sources. They were not eyewitnesses of Jesus, but they were within 150 years of his life. People like Josephus, Suetonius, Thallus, Phlegon, these household names. And they had good information on what happened to the disciples and the apostles. And when you add up what they say about that, you get a story congruent with the New Testament. In fact, they even say that the New Testament apostles were willing to die for the belief that Jesus rose again. And finally, the explosive growth of the church out of Jerusalem. It's really hard to explain how this sect out of Judaism could arise that claimed a man claimed to be God, which was blasphemy to the Jews, and that he rose from the dead, which they didn't think could happen until the end of time. It's really hard to believe how this could happen when the Jews and the Romans could have squashed Christianity in Jerusalem by simply doing one thing. What could they have done? They could have taken the body out of the tomb. Everyone knew where the tomb was, and they could have ended Christianity right then and there. But apparently they couldn't do that because Jesus was still using his body. So we don't have time to cover all these. Let's just try 2 of them. Embarrassing stories. What's embarrassing stories? Historians know that if there's something embarrassing to the author or authors, it's probably true. Why? Because you're not going to make up stories or details that embarrass you. You might make up stories or details that make you look good, but you won't make stories or details up that make you look bad. In fact, let me ask you guys a question. How many people in here have ever lied to make yourself look good? If you don't have your hand up right now, you're lying to make yourself look good, and it's not working. We know you're lying. All right, how many people in here have ever lied to make yourself look bad? You don't do that, right? You might lie to make yourself look good. You won't lie to make yourself look bad. That's why we call this the dove factor, because the New Testament writers have put embarrassing details that make themselves and even potentially Jesus look bad. Let me just give you a few of them. Peter, their leader, is called Satan by Jesus. Do you think they invented this? Do you think Mark, who wrote this down, at one point said to Peter, "Hey, Pete, I'm going to make this a real interesting story. I'm going to have the Lord call you Satan"? What do you think Peter would have said? "Have him call you Satan. Look, I'm the leader here. This is embarrassing." And then Peter says, "Lord, I'll never deny you." What does he wind up doing? He denies him 3 times. And then at the crucifixion, all the disciples, with the exception maybe of John, they all run away. This is like a Monty Python movie. Run away! They all run away. And who are the brave ones? The women. The women are the brave ones. That's right. I am woman, hear me roar. I saw you back there with that. That's right. Now, who wrote the New Testament down? Men. Now, what man is going to invent that he was hiding for fear of the Jews while the women went down and discovered the empty tomb? Would any man in here invent that? No. If I was inventing it, I'd make myself look good, wouldn't you? I'd write down, let's see, we marched right down there and we overpowered that elite Roman guard. John said, "Get out." Peter roundhouse kicked him. Philip said, "We'll be back." And then on Sunday morning, we marched right down to the tomb, and we saw Jesus, who congratulated us on our great faith. And then we went and comforted the trembling women. I would never say I was Mr. Sissy Pants while the women went down and discovered the empty tomb. And oh, by the way, why would you never say the women were the first witnesses in that culture? Forget about the fact it was embarrassing to men. It was. But independent of that, why would you never say the women were the first witnesses? Because a woman's testimony was not considered on par with that of a man. So if you're making up the New Testament story, you'd only have the men be the first witnesses. Yet all four Gospels say the women were the first witnesses, which is telling us what? They really were. They had no motive to make this up. It didn't help their case. It probably hurt their case. In fact, one of these women was a formerly demon-possessed woman. Oh, what a great witness, huh? I actually had a woman come up to me once, and she said, Frank, I know why Jesus appeared to the women first. I said, why? And she said, because he wanted to get the story out. I said, that is an excellent point. I had not thought of that, because ladies, when your man comes home from work, does he say much? There could have been a nuclear explosion down at the plant. He's not going to tell you. You'll be watching, you'll see it on the news before you hear it from him. You'll be watching the news going, hey, hon, what happened? Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you the nuke blew up. I've been hot for 3 days. What's for dinner? I mean, he's not going to tell you, right? I can't even believe this next verse is in the New Testament. You know, at the end of the Gospel of Matthew, the biography of Matthew, where Jesus has his disciples and he's given them the Great Commission, right? He's about to go to heaven, right? He's given the Great Commission. He says, therefore, go therefore, make disciples of all nations. Notice he doesn't say make believers. There's a difference, right? Anyway, as they're standing there and he's given them the Great Commission, it says right there in verse 17 that some believed, but some doubted. He's standing resurrected right in front of them, and they're doubting. It's like they're going, you see that guy over there? Yep. That guy over there is Jesus. Oh, no, it can't be Jesus. He was just killed not long ago. No, I'm telling you, it's him. He's dead. The Romans killed him. It can't be Jesus. It's him. Look, they crucified him. They put a spear in his side. Blood and water came out. He's dead. It can't be him. It is. It isn't. How do you know it's him? The women told me. They're not making this up. There's even potentially embarrassing details about Jesus in there. Like, for example, it says in Mark chapter 3 that his own family came to seize him and take him home because they thought he was out of his mind. Now, you may have heard the scholars say the New Testament writers invented Jesus to be God. Oh, really? Then why is Mark chapter 3 in there, which is almost universally recognized to be the earliest gospel? His family thinks he's crazy. His own brothers don't believe in him. He's called a drunkard. He's called demon-possessed. You think they made that up? Hey, let's call the Lord demon-possessed. He has his feet wiped with the hair of a prostitute, which easily could have been seen as a sexual advance. And oh, by the way, notice there are two prostitutes in Jesus' bloodline, the Messiah's bloodline. Who are they? Rahab and Tamar. Do you think Matthew and Luke, when they did the genealogy, said to one another, you know what? I really think we should spice up the Messiah's bloodline a little bit. Let's put a couple of prostitutes in there. What do you say? Rahab, Tamar. No. They're just telling the truth, as embarrassing as it was. In fact, there's a lot of shady people in the bloodline in addition to Rahab and Tamar. You got Judah, from where we get the term Jew. Not a good guy. You got David, a man after God's own heart. Yeah, but he's a liar, adulterer, and a murderer. Gee, I guess there's hope for the rest of us then. You got Bathsheba in there. In fact, when Matthew gets to her in the genealogy, he won't even mention her name. What does he say instead? Uriah's wife. Ooh. That's a slam. He's telling the truth, but he won't use her name. Who's Uriah? Husband of Bathsheba, whom David had killed so he could have Bathsheba. This is the ultimate no-spin zone. They're telling the truth even though it's embarrassing. You don't see that many places. Things are spun to make them look better than they are. They're telling the truth here. There's much more in the book on that. We got to go one more, and that is excruciating deaths. And this is the argument that says that these men who were in a position to know whether Jesus had risen from the dead died excruciating deaths when they could have saved themselves by saying it never happened. Now, tradition says that all 11 out of 12 died excruciating deaths. We only have good data for about 4 of them that definitely did die excruciating deaths. But there is no account from the ancient world that ever says any one of the original 11 recanted, Judas died. So there's no evidence that anyone recanted and said, no, it didn't happen. Don't kill me. Don't persecute me. Here's my question. What did the New Testament writers have to gain by making up a new religion? In order to answer this question, keep in mind that all the writers of the New Testament were Old Testament Jewish believers with the exception of Luke. Everyone else is a Jew. They thought they were God's chosen people. What did they get by saying Jesus had resurrected from the dead? What did they get by saying a man claimed to be God and then rose from the dead? 2 things they didn't think would happen. They got kicked out of the synagogue, and then they got beaten, tortured, and killed. Last time I checked, that was not a list of perks. We're going to start a new religion. We are? Yeah. What's it going to get us? Well, first get kicked out of the synagogue, then beaten, tortured, and killed. Well, sign me up. What a great idea. No, I don't think they're making this up. In fact, they had every motive to say the resurrection did not happen, not every motive to say it did. I get this question a lot. Maybe you do if you're a Christian. Are there any non-Christian writers that talk about Jesus and the apostles? I briefly mentioned them earlier. They're all in chapter 9 of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. These people are not eyewitnesses, but they seem to have good data. However, what's underneath this question appears to me to be an illicit assumption. You know what the illicit assumption is? You really can't trust the New Testament writers because, you see, these people were biased. They had an agenda. You can only trust the non-Christian writers to tell us the real truth. If you think about that for more than 10 seconds, you'll realize how stupid that assumption is. What did these people have to gain by saying it was true? Nothing. They had everything to lose from a temporal perspective. In fact, to illustrate this, my friend J. Warner Wallace, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a cold case homicide detective who's been on Dateline more than any other detective in America because he solves murders decades old. He's also a Christian, and he took his detective skills to investigate the greatest murder of all time, the murder of Jesus. And he wrote a book called Cold Case Christianity. He also wrote a brand new book called Person of Interest, which is on the table back there as well. And Jim says whenever he finds a dead body that he knows has been murdered, he says there's only 3 reasons why that guy's dead. There's not 1,000 reasons. I don't have to look for 1,000 motives. I only have to look for 3 or a combination of the 3. There was either a sex issue, a money issue, or a power issue. Sex, money, or power. Those are the universal motivators that will drive people to murder. In fact, they're the same motivators that drive us to sin. Why? Because sex, money, and power are good things, but they're so good, we'll sometimes take shortcuts to get them. So, if you're going to say the New Testament writers invented this, you've got to have one or more of those motivators to say, okay, here's why they did it. Ladies and gentlemen, did the New Testament writers get real popular with the ladies for saying Jesus had resurrected from the dead? No, no sex. Did they get money by saying Jesus had resurrected from the dead? No, they weren't 21st century prosperity gospel preachers. Did they get power? No, they got the opposite. They got persecuted. Paul had power as a persecutor. As soon as he becomes a Christian, he gets persecuted. There is no motive to make this up. No sex, no money, no power. They apparently believed it because it really happened. Why would they die for a known lie? You say, wait a minute, Frank. If you're going to say that martyrdom proves Christianity, don't you have to say that martyrdom proves, say, something like Islam? Because sometimes Muslims will die for what they believe. No. Why? Because there's a lot of differences between the Muslim martyrs of today and the New Testament martyrs of New Testament times. But let me just give you one difference for our purposes here. The Muslim martyrs of today haven't witnessed anything to let them know that Islam is true. They just have faith. The New Testament martyrs, on the other hand, were eyewitnesses to Jesus. They saw Jesus. They touched Jesus. They ate with Jesus. They verified with their own senses that Jesus had resurrected from the dead. Many people will die for a lie they think is the truth. Nobody will die for a lie they know is a lie. And the New Testament writers were in a position to know whether it was a lie or not, and they went to their deaths anyway. You can't get better evidence than that unless you were there yourself. All right, last thing I'm going to say on the New Testament, which is going to annoy some of you. In fact, some of you are going to think I'm a heretic if you believe the Bible's the inerrant word of God like I do, but I'm not. Just stick with me. It's going to sound odd. Here it is. Christianity is not true because a series of documents we put under one binding we call the Bible says it's true. In fact, Christianity would be true if the Bible never existed. You say, how can that be? Do you realize there were thousands of Christians before a line of the New Testament was ever written? Frank, how could you be a Christian without the book of Romans? Was Paul a Christian before he wrote the book of Romans? Why was he a Christian? Because the risen Jesus appeared to him. You see, Christianity did not originate with a book. Christianity originated with an event, the resurrection. There would be no book or series of books if the event hadn't occurred. You wouldn't have Jews in the first century writing that a man claimed to be God and rose from the dead if he didn't claim to be God and rose from the dead. It got them nothing good temporally. It got them beaten, tortured, and killed. In fact, we could say it this way. The New Testament writers did not create the resurrection. The resurrection created the New Testament writers. You wouldn't have documents written by Jews in the first century saying this unless it really happened. Now, we could go through more evidence, but we don't have time. We got to get to your questions. But this is the overall argument. Does truth exist? If somebody says there is no truth, you're going to say, is that true? Does God exist? We talked about three arguments, cosmological, teleological, and moral, and we get many of the attributes of God from those arguments without opening the Bible. Are miracles possible? What's the greatest miracle in the Bible? Genesis 1:1. Even atheists are admitting the data for that miracle, even though they don't believe God did it. And is the New Testament true when it comes to the resurrection? Sure seems so. We just went through a little bit of evidence. There's a lot more. So if you want to go further, we have some of the books out on the table, but the university won't let us sell them here. So if you just want to see them, you can go online and get them. We have DVDs too. We're now teaching online courses, so check out, I teach some online courses. Gary Habermas at Liberty University does. J. Warner Wallace, the guy I just told you about, teaches them. Elisa Childers is teaching courses for us now too. Check all that out. We're on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. In fact, we're so into YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, ladies and gentlemen, we've combined these three into one social media platform. We call it YouTwitface. It's kind of a Jersey thing. Have you signed up for YouTwitface yet? We're on Instagram too, by the way. Don't forget about the I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist podcast. We're on TV on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. There's that phone number again. Just text the word evidence to 855-909-0582. I'm going to send you this entire PowerPoint presentation in a PDF format. And if you don't do anything else, download the free Cross-Examined app. It has the TV show on it. It has the podcast on it. It has a quick answer section. It has the schedule. You get a set of Ginsu knives with it. Everything. It comes with it. All right? And I got to tell you about one thing that isn't available yet, but if you pre-order it, we're going to send you something for free. My son and I, who's also a seminary grad, he happens to be in the Air Force as well, wrote a brand new book. Here's the book. Hollywood Heroes, How Your Favorite Movies Reveal God. And these are the movie franchises we look at. Captain America, Iron Man, Harry Potter. Harry Potter? Yeah, you'd be surprised. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Batman, and Wonder Woman. If you go order this on Amazon or wherever you get books now, and you save your receipt, in a few weeks, if you go to HollywoodHeroesBook.com and you send us the receipt, we're going to send you the audio book for free. This is a fun book. Which isn't saying much because I don't really write fun books, but this is a fun book because my son was with me on it, and you'd be surprised at how many of these characters are actually pointing to the ultimate hero, Jesus. So you can teach this to young people especially, all right? Before we get to your questions, it's true, so what? Christianity's true, so what? Well, you know what the best news is? That someone actually did die for you and for me. When I was in the Navy, I was in naval aviation, and we had to earn golden wings, which were fairly hard to earn. But there's nothing more difficult in the Navy, and maybe any military, to earn than a golden trident. That's what the seals wear. Very few people that earn the golden trident, or very few people that start training to earn the golden trident make it through. Maybe 5–10%. Those that do become seals wear that trident with pride. It is their identity. When 𝗦𝗘𝗚𝗠𝗘𝗡𝗧𝗦 was buried in Rosecrans Cemetery just outside of San Diego, just about every Navy SEAL on the West Coast showed up for his funeral. And when they passed his casket, they took off their tridents and they pressed them into his casket. They took their identity and put their identity in the one that died for them. They put their identity in the one who sacrificed himself for them. They took their identity and put their identity in their Savior. That's what we're supposed to do. But our culture says, oh, no, put your identity in your political party, or put your identity in your sexual orientation, or put your identity in your race. There's only one race, the human race. Or put your identity in your boyfriend, or your girlfriend, or your major, or your bank account, or your vocation. Ladies and gentlemen, none of those things are ultimate. We're meant to put our identity in our Savior. You know, Christianity is the only worldview where you don't achieve your identity. You receive your identity. If you have to achieve your identity, first of all, there's always going to be somebody better than you at it. Number two, all the pressure's on you. And number three, it's not eternal. You don't achieve your identity. You receive your identity from the God who sacrificed himself to save you and then rose from the dead to show you that you will rise as well. That you will not only be forgiven for what you've done, but you will be given his righteousness. This is why it's the greatest story ever told. The God of the universe who created and sustains you is the being that came into the world to allow the creatures that tortured and killed him to be saved from their own injustice. Have you ever accepted that free gift of a pardon for all the wrong things you've done? Why wouldn't you? It's free. All right. With that being said, I want to mention that as we go to questions here, Ratio Christi here on campus has a organization is going to meet, I think, on Thursday nights. Let me find the exact screen for this. Here is James's phone number right there. If you want to be a part of this, call 502-648-7944. I'll put that up there again. 502-648-7944. If you want to be a part of Ratio Christi here on campus, where you can go into these issues a lot deeper than what we can do in a couple hours here. So check all that out. You can also find them on social media right here. So I hope you guys who are students here will want to be a part of this. All right, so let's go to questions now. We have a microphone set up. Since no one likes to ask the first question, we'll move right on to the second question. Second question, we can talk about anything we've talked about or even stuff that we haven't talked about. So once the first person comes, then we'll get moving. So come on up to the microphone here if you would. And also I want to mention one other thing. Here's that phone number again. And if you text the word instead of evidence, if you text the word event to that number, we'll send you 3 short texts right now where you can evaluate this presentation and help us to do it better. All right? Yes, sir.
Hey, Frank.
Hey, what's your name?
Jake.
Jake, go ahead, sir.
So, I'm a teacher of the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
and host like a small gathering, we call it gathered ministry on Thursday nights. And one of the biggest things, or how I say the biggest difficult questions to answer, at least that I've found, especially with young believers or young, how do I say this, young people that use such sites as social media sites to gain their knowledge, their information.
Uh-huh.
Trendy one going around. That is, Jesus was a good metaphysical teacher. Jesus was good. He knew what love was. We understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But he wasn't who he says he was. He wasn't, he was just a
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the easy disargument to that was, how can you take one thing that he said, but not believe the other things he said? But it's just to be clear, and this is my main question, is there any other documents or any other gospels that aren't, written from these disciples or these eyewitness accounts that say Jesus was a good teacher, but not the Messiah, but not our Savior?
Well, there are documents written in the 2nd century, Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Judas, Gospel of Peter, these kinds of things, but they weren't written by Thomas, Judas, and Peter because they had long been dead. They were documents that were forgeries that people would borrow apostles' names and put the names on there to try and get people to think they were written by the apostles. But they're anachronistic. They're written in the 2nd century, not the 1st century, so they're not eyewitnesses like the biographies in the New Testament are. And of course, Luke said he checked with eyewitnesses, so they're much later. But if you really think about this, C.S. Lewis pointed this out in Mere Christianity, that he said, I'm trying to prevent people from saying the really foolish things that they say about Jesus. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I'm not ready to accept him as God. He said, that is the one thing we must not say. A man who said the sort of things that Jesus said would not be a good moral teacher. He would rather be a lunatic on the level of a man who says he's a poached egg, or he'd be a liar or something worse. He said, you can shut him up for a fool, spit at him as a demon, or fall at his feet and call him Lord and God, but let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about Jesus being a good human teacher. He did not leave that option open to us. He did not intend to. And if you think about this from just a rational perspective, if a friend came up to you and said things like, before Abraham was born, I am. I and the Father are one. I am the bread of life. If you follow my words, you will never see death. All authority on heaven and earth has been granted to me. And on and on and on. If your friend said these kind of things to you, would you go, well, I just think he's a great moral teacher? No. You would say, look, you're either God or you're a nut, okay? Or you're a liar. You got to give me proof you're God for me to think you are God. Either that, you're a liar, or you're a lunatic. So that's the last thing Jesus was alone. Of course he was a good moral teacher, but he wasn't just a good moral teacher.
Right.
All right?
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Hello, Frank. Hi, I'm Luke.
Hey, Luke. Go ahead, sir.
So as I get a bit older and a bit, hopefully, more mature with my faith, when I start falling into sin, I try to kind of vindicate my actions, because I say, well, I'll just pray about it, and God will forgive me. I'll just ask for forgiveness. But I know that's probably not the most productive nor the most helpful way of doing it. So when inevitably we all fall into temptation, wondering if you've had a better route.
Paul talks about this in Galatians chapter 3, where he says, you foolish Galatians, are you trying to accomplish by the law what you started with by the Spirit? The way that you get sanctified is the same way you get justified. What's justified? That's the second that you trust in Christ, your sins are forgiven and you're given his righteousness. So you are seen as righteous in God's eyes. But practically, you and I both continue to sin. So how do we get more and more like Jesus? What we do is by faith, by trusting in Christ, we abide in him, as he says in John 15. That we need to stay close to him, which means we need to pray, which means we need to study, which means we need to meditate, which means we need to get in a healthy, well-balanced church where we can get accountability from other people. We can't be out there on our own when we're struggling with sin. We got to get with other like-minded people who will help us. But ultimately, we got to stay connected to Jesus. It's not about obeying a bunch of laws. It's about trusting in what Christ has done, because he is the one that has saved us, and out of gratitude for what he's done for us, we will obey his commands. As he said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments.
Right, so that's an active and aggressive mindset and lifestyle change.
Yeah, it is. But again, it's not about trying to live up to some standard of laws. Of course we obey his commandments, but the motivation behind it is not to show ourselves pleasing to God. God has already accepted you because of the sacrifice he's provided. The motivation behind it is out of love for what he's done for us. So the more we meditate on what he's done for us, the more our hearts will want to obey his commands, rather than be like a slave. Oh, I got to do this. You know, if you truly love somebody, or if you truly love somebody and they ask you to do something for them, because you love them, you'll have a different motivation than if just someone you don't love who's a taskmaster and says, you need to do this, right? There's a different motivation. One is out of obligation, the other is out of love. And it's out of love we ought to be sanctified.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Jared.
Hey, Jared. Go ahead.
So my question is, at the beginning of the talk, you mentioned the question that you always ask to atheists: if Christianity was true, would you become a Christian?
Yeah.
My question is basically, what do you do when the answer is no? And it's not evidence that's keeping them from coming to God, it's apathy.
Yeah, it's a great question. And in fact, when people say no, you might ask them, well, why wouldn't you? And see why they wouldn't. Try and learn more about where they're coming from. But there are some people who are apathetic or hostile to Christianity, and it doesn't matter what you do, they're never going to accept Christ. And by the way, Jesus said this would happen. Why? Remember he talked about the parable of the 4 soils? Right? There's only one good soil out there, which means a lot of people are, by their own choice, choose to be different types of soils. They don't want it to be true. So what can you do with somebody like that? You can show them the joy of your life as best you can, the joy of the Lord. You can pray for them. You can plant seeds on occasion, and you can go have pizza. All right? Just be in their lives if you can. Then, at some point, that person's going to experience heartache, because we all do. And if that heartache drives them to God, your phone is going to ring and that person's going to be on the other end. They're not going to call their atheist friend who says, well, stuff just happens. There's no rhyme or reason to life. Get over it. Right? They're going to call somebody of spiritual depth when that happens. When the teacher or when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So all you can do at that point is love them and be in their lives and wait. Because look, all of us, I don't care who we are in this room, every one of us at some point in our lives, whether believers or not, are more interested in God sometimes and less interested in other times, right? That's just the way life is. Why do we expect everyone to be right where we are all the time? We shouldn't. So all we can do is just love, pray, and be there when something happens. All right?
Thank you, Dr. Turek.
Hey, thank you. Yes, sir.
Hey, Frank.
What's your name?
My name is Matt.
Hey, Matt. Go ahead.
Hey, so I'm a Christian, and my question is, do you think prayer actually changes our circumstances? So, you know, we normally pray for like our grandma to get healed. We pray for safety on the road. Some people pray for wisdom in a situation. Do you think that our prayer actually changes what will happen? Meaning, if we did not pray for our grandma to be healed, that Jesus wouldn't do anything? Or do you think our prayer changes?
The prayer of a righteous man availeth much, says James. Yes, prayer doesn't change God. God knows what we're going to do before we do.
Right.
But if we hadn't have done it, there might have been a different outcome. But we don't know what that different outcome would be because we don't have that kind of knowledge. But yes, Jesus says, keep knocking. Keep knocking, keep knocking, keep praying. Because prayer really, in many ways, changes us rather than God. It puts us more dependent on God. And when we step back and we're not in communion with God, then we have a tendency maybe to get cold and standoffish. So we have to stay in fellowship with God through prayer as well. So yes, it does, but we can't always see how it happens. And I know there are double-blind prayer studies and all this.
Yeah.
I take those with a grain of salt. Why? Because you can't know what an agent will do all the time. Right?
What do you mean
God
by
is
that?
God is not a vending machine. God is not a mechanical thing where if you do X, he's going to do Y all the time. In fact, sometimes he allows things to occur that are inexplicable to us. This is one way I know that I can trust God even when I can't see the outcome. Like, let me give you an example of this. Some people will say, well, why does God allow babies to die? Right? It's a good question. And the answer is, I know why God allows babies to die, because we live in a fallen world. And things are going to go wrong. But if you ask me, why did God allow this baby to die, I can't give you a certain answer. You know, a baby gets sick at church, everyone at church prays, the baby dies anyway. You're going, God, where are you, right? Well, it might be that maybe this baby dying today ripples forward, because there's something known as the ripple effect, that every event that occurs ripples forward to affect trillions of other events and even people. Maybe a baby dying today ripples forward to ultimately help cause a great evangelist 500 years from now to rise up and save millions of people. I can't see how all those ripples come together to do that, but God, who's outside of time, can. This is why he tells Job to just trust him, right? There's the ripple effect. So sometimes we pray, we get no. Sometimes we pray, we get yes. Sometimes we pray, we get wait. And we trust God because he can see the end from the beginning. We can't.
Do you think we should expect God to do what we ask, or we should just expect anything?
Jesus says, pray in the Father's will. You know, Jesus was about to go to the cross, and he said, Lord, if there's any other way that this cup can pass from me, take it from me. But not my will, but your will. And there was no other way that God could save humanity without innocent sacrifice. So Jesus, it wasn't his will, it was the Father's will. He went to the cross for us. So our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be your name, your will be done. Not my will, your will.
Yeah.
So we should pray for God's will.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Do you think God interacts or communicates to us at all outside of Scripture? Like, I believe Scripture is his word that we can read and obey. Do you think he interacts with us through people, circumstances? I tend not to think that, but what do you think?
Well, I think he does, but I don't think he does in the way most people think he does. And
Yeah.
I'm going to make a lot of enemies tonight for saying this,
Yeah.
okay? When people are trying to find God's will, they think that X marks the spot. God wants me to marry one person, to go to one school, to get one job, and I've got to look for all these hints that God has put before me. That's what most Christians believe. Right. I'm in a minority. I think God gives us the wisdom view. What's the wisdom view? That God gives you a moral parameter in which you need to stay, and then you're free to choose inside that parameter. Like, for example, when it comes to who you marry, he says, just marry somebody in the Lord. And as soon as you marry somebody in the Lord, you've created God's will in your life. But if God were to tell you what to do every single day by hints and all these things, why would you even have a Bible?
Exactly.
Why would you have a book of Proverbs?
Yeah.
What's the point? No, you get maturity by God giving you parameters, and then you make choices inside those parameters. Now, if God wanted to tell you something directly, could he do it? Of course he can. I just don't think that's normative.
Yeah.
I think that that's rare when he does that.
Okay.
But of course he can do it.
Cool.
All
Thank
right?
you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
My name is Nicholas.
Say again?
Nicholas.
Nicholas, go ahead.
So you said in your presentation that you believe in the Big Bang.
Yes.
That it's the first, most evident miracle.
Yes.
So would
Can
that
you move
mean...
over just a little bit?
Yeah,
so
sorry.
That, yeah. Maybe you could take the mask off, too. That would help. Thank you.
Can you hear me better?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So you believe in the Big Bang as the first, most evident miracle. Would you say then that the universe is 14.54 billion years old? Or would you argue a more young Earth?
Yeah, I'm absolutely certain the universe is at least 60 years old.
Makes sense. I can agree.
I'll throw my dad in there, or my mom in there. It's at least 84 now, okay? I actually think the evidence is better that it's old. 13.8 is the latest, or maybe 14-something billions, okay? I think there's better evidence for that. But no matter what position you take, you're making assumptions you can't prove, right?
So on top of that, do you believe in evolution? Because you mentioned the flood and you were like, oh, that's crazy, isn't it? But you never actually said whether or not you believe in the first 11 chapters of Genesis as literal or not. So I was wondering...
It depends on what you mean by literal and where. Like, for example, the creation story in Genesis 1, I think it's telling a literal truth in a poetic way. And I think it's a polemic against the Egyptian creation stories. Because in the Egyptian creation stories, these gods are somehow already in the universe existing, and they bring order to chaos. Moses, who's writing to people who had just spent 400 years in Egypt, is saying, No, their story isn't true. God is outside the universe, and he created the universe, and he brings order just by speaking. And so if you look at the Egyptian creation story and then look at the Genesis creation story, you can see some parallels. In other words, the Hebrew creation story is a polemic against the Egyptian creation story, and it's told in a poetic way. I don't think it was meant for us to add up all the days and figure out how long ago this was. I mean, you can do that, and maybe that's the right interpretation, but you can easily say, no, that's not the case. In fact, if you look at the first verse of the Bible, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So I always ask people, when did God create the heavens and the earth? Well, the first verse says, in the beginning. Okay, when was that? Doesn't say. You say, what about the days? The days don't begin until verse 3. And there are several possible interpretations of the word day. There's 24 hours, there's 12 hours, there's an era. Like if I were to say that Tom Brady was a good quarterback, a great quarterback in his day, you wouldn't think he was good for just 24 hours, right? It's an era. And then when you get to day 7, the day of rest, that day is still going on right now, according to Hebrews 4. So if the 7th day is longer, maybe the other days are longer, we simply don't know.
So on top of that, then, would you say you agree with the biological evolution?
It depends on what you mean by evolution.
Do you believe in a literal Adam and Eve?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think microevolution is true. I think macroevolution has a lot of problems, even regardless of what the Bible says. I think there are several problems with macroevolution, including the fossil record, including epigenetic information, including irreducible complexity, including the genetic limits to change. I mean, we can't even break genetic limits with our minds. Why should we expect a non-intelligent process to break those genetic limits without any intelligence? Doesn't seem to make any sense. So, no, I don't think macroevolution is true. I do think there are adaptations within a type. We can observe that, but I don't think one type becomes another type. There's too many obstacles that you would need to go over for that to happen. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
All right. Thank you, Nicholas. Appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Hey, Frank. My name is
Sorry,
Patrick.
Clint's got to keep raising and lowering that. I want all the same height people in line. All right? Yes, sir. What's your name?
Hey, Frank. My name is Patrick.
Patrick, go ahead.
I just have a quick question about denominations. I am a non-denominational Christian, and I know that a lot of denominations have Christ at the center. But a lot of my friends are Catholics, and they say that Catholicism is the one true way, and it is like the most direct route to enter the kingdom of heaven.
Okay.
So I was just going to ask, are other denominations legitimate, or where do they line up?
Well, when someone says something, it's not your job to refute what they say. It's their job to support what they say. So if your Catholic friend says that this is the one true church, you're going to ask for evidence. Why do you think that? What evidence do you have for that? Okay? But even Roman Catholics admit that there are separated brethren according to them, and they would be the Protestants, okay? Some of the Protestants anyway. But sometimes I get the question, look, I was brought up in the Catholic Church. I went to Catholic high school. I'm not Catholic now. But sometimes I get the question, because I speak mostly at Protestant services, although I have spoken in a Catholic church before. Sometimes I get the question, do you think Catholics can be saved? And I always say, I even think some Baptists can be saved, okay? Because it's not where you go to church as to whether or not you're saved. It's whether you accept the free gift of eternal salvation that Christ has provided for us, okay? So if you compare the Protestants and the Catholics, I'm talking about Bible-believing Protestants and Catholics, they agree on many of the essentials of the faith. They all agree there's a God, you are not him, that we're sinners, that we need a Savior. They agree that Jesus is the sacrifice for our sins. Catholics, I think, unfortunately, meld together sanctification and justification when I think those two things are separate. That's why it seems that they mix in works with salvation, with justification, because they call justification and sanctification the same thing. But they agree that grace is necessary, just like the Protestants do. They believe Jesus is coming again to judge the living and the dead. They disagree on some things, quite obviously. But if you agree on the essentials, in my view, and according to Paul, I think you're saved. In fact, I probably have some wrong beliefs too. We all do, right? None of us are omniscient. But if we're focused in on the essentials, if we confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart he's risen from the dead, you will be saved, says Paul in Romans 10.
If we are initially saved, what do we do with that? Like, where do we go with our faith? Because in Ephesians, I've learned that it's by faith and good deeds. So
well, you're prepared to do good works, but as I said earlier, you're prepared to do good works in the same way that you came to faith, by trusting in what Christ has done, and out of gratitude for what he's done, you do good works in order to love him and to build his kingdom. So we're not just here to get fire insurance and wait for our bodies to break down. Jesus said, go make disciples, not make believers. So how do we make disciples? We get sanctified, and we try and disciple other people as well to become more like Christ.
Thank you.
All right,
Appreciate it.
thanks. Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
I'm going to go with Z.
Z?
Yeah.
Do you mind taking the mask down? So I
No,
can hear
I
you?
actually do mind.
Okay, I'll try and hear you, but go ahead.
I think I'm loud enough.
All right.
So I was invited here by my coworker and very good friend and a Christian man. So I was open-minded and I came. I'm probably the only atheist that's going to take the stand here.
Well, thank you for coming.
Of course. So I have a few comments and a couple of questions.
Sure, go ahead.
So I came in here as an atheist, and I am definitely a stronger atheist now.
Okay.
This was amazing in many ways, as in the alienation of the LGBTQ community, Muslims, women with the gossiping and what's for dinner comment. Also, it's amazing how you use science to your advantage when you use technology and show the planets and the dimensions and all that. But then you bash science when you want to make funny statements and you give examples. And data is not interpreted by people. It's actually peer reviewed, and it's a very rigorous peer review. Without that,
who does the peer review?
Scientists, a group of
other
scientists
people, right?
that are. It's an unbiased process, and I'm not saying it's always right. Nothing is always right. I understand that, but you mentioned gravity like so many times, but that is science. That's an example of science working.
Let me just make a quick comment on that, because when I say science doesn't say anything scientists do, there are some scientific facts we all agree on, right? But on some of these issues where there is controversy and we don't agree on, like maybe the origin of the universe or where life came from, those kinds of issues, because they're historical issues and we can't go in the laboratory and repeat them, then it really does depend on how you interpret the data.
But I am comfortable with saying I don't know.
Okay, that's fine.
I don't want to say 100% that it came from this person. You don't know and I don't know, and I'm comfortable saying that yes, I don't know, and one day we'll find out. But at this point, I don't. Anyway, of course, I'm on this side, and your evidence did not convince me. Just two more comments. So our genetics are not the same from the time we are conceived till we die. We acquire a lot of mutations, and we pass it on to the next generation.
Right, but your genetic code is the same.
No, it is not. Genetic code can
You
change with
receive
mutations.
You receive mutations, but your genome that you started with is duplicated in your cells. That was my point. It's not like you're getting new code. Your code may be mutated.
So a code consists of nucleotides, A, G, C,
Right.
T, and those can change, is what I'm saying.
Okay, mutated, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
and
They
you
can
pass
break
that,
down, we get that.
You pass that on. And I think my biggest question with people who believe in God, whether it's Christianity or any religion, any theism, is why do we have to fear God? If God loves everybody, why do you have to fear God? Doesn't that make God selfish?
No, I don't think it makes him selfish, and that would be a moral claim to say that he's selfish and he shouldn't be selfish if he was. By what standard would we say that would be wrong? Okay, but the reason why God wants us to fear him and to worship him is because he knows that's what's best for us. He doesn't need our worship. He's an infinite being.
What about the wrath of God?
Well, the wrath
How is that
justice.
unconditional love from God?
What's that?
How is that unconditional love from God if you're gonna if he's going to show you wrath of God?
Well, because that's justice. Is it right for, say, someone who has committed, let's just say, rape, to say to that person, no punishment because I love you? Would that be correct?
I don't think God is really monitoring on a person-by-person basis, because if someone who's committing rape is really, if they're caught, then they are punished by the judicial system. If that person were to live a normal life, I don't see how that person would be seeked out by God and punished
So
individually.
Are there people that go to their grave without ever getting justice for what they've done?
Absolutely.
Okay, so would it be right of God to give them justice in the afterlife?
But how do you decide what's justice, and how does God seek out what you've done?
How does he seek? He knows what we've done. If he exists,
Okay.
he knows.
I cannot get behind that, but thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let me just mention one other thing, and that is, and you can come back to the mic if you want.
No, that's okay.
Okay, well, thank you. The couple of things you said in the beginning about the LGBT community and women and all this, there's no offense taken, but I just want to point out that you're assuming a standard when you say that if I said something wrong, I'm wrong about. The question is, from an atheistic perspective, what is that standard? Why would it be wrong to do anything wrong to women or LGBTQ or I'm not saying I did that. I'm just trying to figure out.
I'm not saying you did anything wrong. I'm saying it's
Okay.
alienating them, right, with the whole man and woman.
Well,
And
what if that's really true, though?
What if what I'm saying is true?
Okay, are
right?
you?
But I'm comfortable saying I don't know that. But you take that your idea and you're like, this is the truth. And
Okay, let me ask you though. I appreciate you coming here and saying, I disagree with you, Frank, on these things. Now, when you do that, I'm not claiming you're alienating me. I'm just saying I'm glad that you're giving me what you think is true. So why is it when I give what I think is true, I'm alienating people?
No. I'm talking about a very specific thing where you mentioned that I'm not going to charge for this, about the marriage should happen between a man and a woman. And if a man and a man were to get together and a woman were to get together, that would not set right by God.
That would be what?
That would not be right by God.
What if that's true?
How would you know that? How do you know that?
Well,
so you're expecting these people to live a life of misery and
no, I'm not saying that. That wasn't the point of that comment.
Isn't that justice according to the moral code of God?
The point of the comment was to say that the reason the government's involved in marriage is to perpetuate and stabilize society. It's not to recognize that two people have romantic affinity for one another. That's not the reason. When you go for a marriage license, they don't ask you, do you really love him? Do you really love her? The reason that we have marriage, civil marriage, is because the way you perpetuate and stabilize society is to have men and women come together to procreate and bring up children to be good citizens. And only a man and a woman can do that.
Oh, I completely disagree.
Okay, well.
And also it's not true. Men and men can get married now in the United States.
I know,
women and women can get
I know,
married
but
now.
that's my point, okay? That's my point, that we might have our own morality here that says that's okay, but I'm saying that the facts of nature say that when men and women come together and procreate and stay together in a biological family relationship, that's what's best for society.
Okay.
And that's not even argued anymore from a statistical standpoint.
Well,
we know that kids...
Because we don't have enough same couple families right now to compare. Maybe in 10 years we will.
Okay.
And we can compare then.
Okay, thank you.
Also, just the last comment about the women thing.
Sure.
That's like when I know you're not trying to alienate, but when you say like, oh, some women came to me and said, oh, because Jesus wanted people to know. It's kind of sexist. You know, we don't just always like to gossip. I mean, that's not our only job, and to make dinner.
Okay.
And you might not
I know all humor is risky. I'm not going to apologize for humor. Okay? Everyone laughs because it's true generally.
And then it gets perpetuated to children that are here, and they believe that stuff.
They believe what? That women talk more than men?
Oh, my God.
Is that wrong? Generally, that's true.
sexist.
Is it true of everyone? No. But that's why people laugh, because we observe that.
Anyway, all right, thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Hi, Frank. My name's Max.
Hey,
this
Max.
is kind of a question for a friend. He is Catholic,
Okay.
and I'm kind of borrowing off the last Catholic question a little bit. But him and I are having a discussion on like the different viewpoints of interpreting the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
What is the best way to go about like witnessing to him and trying to show him truth on like their correct hermeneutics and the exegesis of reading the Bible? Of like we both agree in the same like we have the same agreement of the gospel and everything, but like the view of creation, everything. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's got to be get it closer, a little bit louder. Start over. Just the real quick question. Go ahead.
My friend's Catholic, and we're arguing over the hermeneutics of the Bible, of the best way to interpret it. What is the correct way of the exegesis of reading it?
Okay, I'll give you a real short. I think we have a course called How to Interpret Your Bible, and here's an acronym, STOP. Whenever you come to a passage, you got to stop. S stands for what's the situation, what's going on here. That's why you just can't read one verse. T stands for what type of literature is it? Is it poetry? Is it law? Is it prophecy? Is it parable? Is it just straight prose? Because you're going to interpret those different kinds of literature differently, right? You're not going to interpret a poem like you would law, right? The O stands for who's the object of the passage. Is it ancient Israel? Is it the church, the New Testament church? Is it us? Is it just one person in the New Testament church? You got to figure that out. The P stands for is it prescriptive or descriptive? Because there's a lot of descriptions in the Bible. People think if it's in the Bible that God prescribes it. No. For example, David's adultery is described in the Bible, but it's not a prescription for the rest of us. He doesn't want us going committing adultery, right? Okay. So if you look at the situation, look at the type of literature, look at the object of the passage, who's it written to, and whether it's prescriptive or descriptive, you can, in most cases, figure out what it really means.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Turek, my name is Reese,
hey,
and the question I have is the topics that you gave are really good for ministering to atheists, but how would you suggest ministering to a deist? Because the teleological, the cosmological argument, deists agree on that, but then you get to the moral argument and they're saying, well, God presupposed that on human beings, but he doesn't exist anymore, like he's out of the picture. So how would you explain that to a deist?
Again, I would ask them, why do you think God is out of the picture? What evidence do you have for that? How is the world staying together right now? And I would also point out that from a deistic perspective, the creation of life and the creation of new life forms happens inside the universe after it's created. So that's not a deistic perspective. In other words, God didn't create the universe and then left it. God had to intervene in the universe in order to create life. So that's not a deistic perspective either. And of course, from the moral law perspective, if they're going to say that God is no longer involved morally, then what is the moral standard by which they would even judge something being right or wrong? Murder, theft, rape, any of these things. So it would also seem that since God is infinitely loving, he would come in order to rescue us from our own sin, and that's what Jesus actually does. And then, of course, you've got to point out the prophecy in the Old Testament, the events of the New Testament. The resurrection, of course, is the key thing you want to look at. If God's not involved, how does Jesus rise from the dead? Are you going to say he didn't rise from the dead? Okay, well, what's your explanation for how the church or how all these believers came up and all the things we talked about earlier out of Jerusalem? How does this happen out of Jerusalem if there was no resurrection? So I think those are some things you could point out.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Yes, sir. What's your name?
How's it going, Frank? My name's Devin. And I was wondering.
These are the last two questions. We got to go. Okay,
I was wondering if there's any evidence for Jesus Christ performing miracles outside of the Bible by non-Christian writers.
By non-Christian writers. None of those people were eyewitnesses, okay? There's a disputed passage from Josephus, which the one that wasn't interpolated by Christians talks about him being virtuous. But most scholars today, even people who are not believers in Jesus, they're not Christians, but they're New Testament scholars. You know, there are New Testament scholars that are not believers, as you know. The general outcome, or I should say the general conclusion of these folks, the majority of them think that Jesus was some kind of wonder worker, okay, based on the evidence we have, even though they might not believe that Jesus rose from the dead. The Jewish Talmud said that Yeshua was hung on the eve of the Passover for practicing sorcery. So it's kind of a backhanded way of saying something. He was doing something supernatural, but he's not the Messiah, right? So there are non-Christian writers that talk about the fact that the New Testament believers believe Jesus rose from the dead and willing to die for this belief. But I don't know of any that said, well, he did this, this, and this, right? But I don't know why we would need that, because the best evidence we have are from the eyewitnesses themselves, these Jewish writers who had no motive to invent this, as we already saw earlier, who said that Jesus did do these miracles and ultimately did rise from the dead. And they had no motive to make this up.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, ma'am. Final question.
Hi. Can you hear me?
No, you got to speak louder.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Clint will help you.
Okay.
Go ahead. What's your name?
Allison.
Allison, get close as you can to that.
Okay. So I have friends that are part of the LDS Church.
Yes.
And part of their belief about Joseph Smith is that he was martyred.
Mm-hmm.
You said that the apostles' martyrdom was different from martyrs in Islam because of their eyewitness. But to like Mormons, they are Joseph Smith was an eyewitness, I guess.
Eyewitness of what, though? What did Joseph Smith die for, is the question. Did he die for some sort of miraculous claim?
Yes.
What?
That he saw an angel, and that means that
he saw an angel.
Yeah.
And there was something about golden plates, right?
Yeah.
Are golden plates miraculous?
I don't know.
No, I mean you could make golden plates, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think there was anything miraculous in Joseph Smith's life that would get me to believe that things he said that contradicted what the New Testament writers said should be believed. Now, the best place to go for this is watchmanfellowship.org, I think it is, watchmanfellowship.org. It's run by a former Mormon by the name of James Walker, who gets into some of these issues if you really want to learn more. You can also Google Sandra Tanner. Sandra Tanner is a descendant of Brigham Young, who, as you know, one of the founders of Mormonism. And she came out of the Mormon Church many years ago and has collected many documents from the Mormon Church, and she makes them available on her website. So I would check into Sandra Tanner and James Walker.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks, thank you so much for being here. God bless you all.